Cumberland Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
Here.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Snicker.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Okay, there are no additional agenda items, and just a couple updates on coming agendas. Our next meeting will be this week, Wednesday, April 20th, and that'll be a budget work session, and we'll be discussing housing and community development, the Speed Camera Fund, and communications. A week from today, Monday the 25th, we have our second budget hearing on the FY12 budget, and we also have the constant yield tax rate hearing, and that is when we have scheduled budget reconciliation. The following Monday, May 2nd, we have another budget work session with reconciliation. Monday, May 9th, we have public hearing on Hilltop Road traffic calming, followed by a work session on the same topic. And Monday, May 16th is Ward 6 night, and we have a special session with first reading of the budget ordinances. It's now time for public comment, and if anybody would like to speak on anything on anything, since we don't have any voting session tonight, if you can please come to the podium and identify yourself.
Yep, my name's Pat Loveless, 7620 Maple Avenue, your favorite beach delegate. I also want to ask a question, if we could do it, because I like going to the ward nights, and I love the receptions we have out there. But I was wondering if they can get some dietetic sweets out there, like stuff with no sugar and low cholesterol and low fat, because some of us need to lose our weight. And I'm one of them, and I'm also diabetic. And it'd be really nice if we could make accommodations to people like me, because we know that on every ward night we're going to sabotage our diets. We're going to blow our diet, because everything is so good out there. You guys bring so much goody to the table out there, and I commend you people on that. But we gotta start losing our weight, and I'm one of them. I'm getting fat, and I'm trying to do something about that. And I'm also diabetic, and I noticed when we have the stuff, I can't leave it alone. I love those cheesecakes and everything, but I was wondering if it's possible that we could get some dietetic stuff there. Some dietetic sweets and goodies. I'm sure we can. Also, we're trying to keep kids out of gangs. I know that. We're trying to keep kids away from drugs and violence. And we don't want them hanging on street corners. It would be great if we could start seeing if somehow we can get them to come in and sit in on the audience on the city council nights, and maybe even speak up on the public comment, because that would teach the kids participation in our city government, and teach them at an early age how to become good citizens. And if we get them involved in this, it would be great, because the reason they join gangs is they need a situation to belong. They feel left out. They want to belong to something, a club or whatever. And it would be great if we could get them to come to the city council nights, the ward nights, and sit in on the audience and learn about what's going on in our government. It's better to have them in here learning and becoming activists rather than out there on the street corner being troublemakers and thugs and gangsters. We don't need that. I think there's one way we can at least get some of the kids out of the gangs. If we get one kid out of the gang and avoid him to turning to a life of crime, I think it'd be really worth it. We got a lot of seats here that are not being filled. And I'd love it if we could really get the kids involved, get their families involved, get the schools involved. Because I thought the schools had a class in citizenship. At least they did when I was a kid. And if we could get the schools interested, the young activist clubs should be able to pass the word around. Maybe the city could pass a note around to the different bulletin boards in the schools, so that we can get the kids active, maybe in social studies. Well, thank you very much. Try to do what we can do for our children and our youth and our diets.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lovelace. We'll try and supply some portions of vegetables and maybe some portions of self-control as well.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Robert Jepson with Washington Adventist Hospital and Adventist Healthcare. It's good to see you tonight. It's always good to be here. I realized I've never compelled you to give me street credit for being a native of Tacoma Park, so now's my plea and my desire and my interest to do that. But seriously, it's good to be here. And I think, as you know, you received a communication a few weeks back that we've had some changes in the executive structure of Adventist Healthcare and Washington Adventist Hospital. I send greetings from Jerry Stocks. He's alive and well. I spoke to him, and he knew that we were coming here, and he wanted me to pass along his greetings. Jerry has moved to a position of Senior Vice President and Chair of Next Century Health with Adventist Healthcare. He's going to be focusing on initiatives related to connectivity on research with the FDA and partnerships with other organizations related to care delivery and access issues. In the meantime, as part of a number of changes that took place, Joyce Portella, who's been with Washington Adventist Hospital for about 2 years now, assumed the role of President of Washington Adventist Hospital, and Joyce was very interested in coming by to say hi and introduce herself to the community. She's relatively new to the area. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Joyce Portella.
Good evening. I'm Joyce Portella, and President of Washington Adventist Hospital, and proud to be so, and proud to be a part of this community. I know that we're in a time of transition, but do know that none of this was a surprise to us. Jerry actually helped recruit me to this community with this eventual plan in mind. So while it's been an orderly transition for us, I know it may have been a bit of a surprise to you. I don't want to be a stranger to any of you. I've actually planned to come here and give you my business cards. Mr. Mayor, I gave you one right before the meeting. There's a typo in my email address, so I will get you a new one and get one for the rest of you so you know how to reach me directly. I hope that we'll have an opportunity to perhaps host a breakfast or set up some kind of an ongoing communication so that you all can feel very much a part of what's going on at Washington Adventist and stay included in our hospital and in our plans. And I know that you'll always have an open ear with me there, and that I look forward to working with you for some time to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, and good to meet you. And we look forward to a long and productive relationship.
Likewise.
And thank you, Mr. Jepson, for coming as well. Always good to see you.
Hello, I'm Lori Charcuti, and I live on Ethan Allen Avenue. And right now, Ethan Allen Avenue is a disaster, and I came to tell you a little bit about it in case you haven't been on it recently. So today, actually, there are 6 metal plates still there, despite the fact that metal plates are not supposed to be left at the end of the day. And then, of course, for the last roughly 2 months, I think it's been maybe 6 weeks, the ongoing destruction and recreation in a sort of the wave-based form, I think is the technical term for what they're doing. Plenty of lips, and really it's a nightmare. So I think that probably most folks drive on it at different times, and if you haven't been there recently, I would encourage you to drive on it. It's has really serious safety implications, people driving on the opposite side of the road regularly, and of course it comes right at the point in the curve in the road. It's also, Ethan Allen has never been a great place for bike riding. Now it's particularly dangerous for that. And, of course, the Tacoma Junction, the traffic that backs up kind of going both ways with the junction on one end and the New Hampshire on the other end. And so, further slows down the traffic coming through. We're already breathing fumes all through rush hour. And then, of course, more cut-through traffic as people try to avoid that. And then the real tragedy of the loss of speed camera funds because everyone's going so slowly at that section. That was a joke. So the other issues are really serious. But I think the biggest concern for myself and other folks who live on Ethan Allen is that there doesn't seem to be really clear direction about even what anyone can and should do about it. So it's not clear who's permitting and what the permit even means, and so it's not clear what role the city potentially can play. And when I've asked for direction to some state agency that might be responsible, there's sort of no clear direction there as a regulatory agency. So I guess what I'm asking is for the I think it's an issue that affects not only people who live on that street and Ward 2, but I think it affects everybody in the city because everyone's, people are coming through the city that way. And I think that I'm asking for the council to take it very seriously and do whatever it is that you can do. But it would also be helpful to have some clarity about whose responsibility that is and what it means to, what the permit that the city gives means, if it means anything, and, who oversees that and who follows up on that. Councilmember Clay and I have had some communication as well as other people in the community, and we've been told that we could inform the city manager, but it's not clear then what you have the ability to do with that information, and it just kind of gets worse and worse. So we'd like both action and direction and information.
Okay. I know that it's of great concern to a lot of people, and I know that we've gotten a fair amount of information. Does either the city manager or the deputy city manager want to just kind of summarize where we are in terms of what the differentiation is in terms of ability to get some responsibility from the contractor, who's a contractor to Washington Gas, and the state and the relationship with the city?
Not sure I can answer all of those questions. At this time, the permit for Washington Gas is through the city. I do know our city engineer has been out there more than the project manager overseeing the project. The workers know him at this point. There apparently is an opportunity, and we could pull the permit. There's been a lot of discussions about that, and that there's a meeting, if it didn't happen today, is pending to try to get the issue resolved. We're taking it very seriously, but I think we'll have to wait and hear from the city engineer what the final result of that discussion is.
Yeah, I would just add, the metal plates are certainly, it's kind of a catch-22. They actually will help Washington Gas expedite the work because they don't have to sit there and keep closing and reopening the trench. We had asked, as you're aware, Lori, that they try to minimize the number of those, so it's disappointing to hear you're saying there's 6 of them on the road at this time. Probably the best person to talk to would either be our city engineer or our public works director. Before you leave, if you can maybe jot down for me your phone number and your email address, and I'll have someone get in touch with you tomorrow. That would be okay. Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Can I add to that the agreement is that they won't have plates over the weekend. So no plates over the weekend. But then 6 plates seems really excessive. So there's 6 plates today.
It's right past the stop sign, Jackson.
Okay, I haven't been on it today. And, the challenge with pulling the permit, of course, is that it just prolongs the agony at all. But yeah, it's continuing to be a significant problem and challenge for people, and I hear a lot about it in Ward 2, because the contractor had made an agreement, and the engineer went out there and they talked specifically about down to the process that they were going to use to patch the holes, and this patch process then would provide a solid patch, at least for a 24-hour period till they came out there the next day, but that's not what's happening. So it's dangerous. There's not a lot of bicyclists on that road because it's already dangerous, but I can tell by looking at it that it would be unsafe to ride a motorcycle on it.
I drove a Honda Civic down there today. It was
Yeah.
unsafe for that.
Yeah. And people think that, because I have an SUV, that I must have no problems with it, but the SUV has a stiff suspension and not a flexible suspension, and it's incredibly jarring and hurts my back to drive over it, even in the SUV. So, they're significant.
Anybody else who wants to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll move along to council comments. Councilmember Robinson.
On a similar note, I know that there's going to be work done on Carroll, and that the fear is that the cut through or the drive around will be on Jefferson, and got a couple of emails about that today, and I appreciate your response and Daryl's response. But I urge everybody to pay attention to that, and there's one little spur off Jefferson called Fremont that doesn't go anywhere, and there were tales of people going up Fremont hoping that they could cut around and get back to Carroll, and then because there are no sidewalks, people would back into lawns, and the last time it happened, it was a disaster, and whatever we can do to minimize the pain this time around. I was thinking it through. I don't see a lot of other options to get around that chunk of road unless you come up Maple, because there's no road before Jefferson all the way down to Sligo Creek. So that's a very difficult stretch.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'd like to make two comments tonight, one of which would be addressed in the interest of emergency preparedness, and the other addressed in the interest of historic preservation. I had the occasion, as well as we all know from watching the news, is that there was a lot of storm damage across the South, including North Carolina this past Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And in North Carolina alone, tornadoes caused, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 tornadoes that were reported, and 22 people died. And what sort of, for me, why I mentioned this is that I found myself in the middle of this. My wife and I were traveling, spent the night in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, which is just below Hampton Roads, and everybody knew in that whole eastern half of the state of North Carolina that these tornadoes were due, because they've been coming over from the middle of the Midwest. And but the problem is that there were so many of them. And what I realized, being in the middle of a sudden tornado alley, is that there really is nothing that an individual can do, because you don't. It's not like one can escape and sort of say, well, we'll go over here so we can avoid it. As it turned out, there was a storm cell headed right for Elizabeth City, so we went to our motel, and my wife got into the bathtub, and I looked out the window, and we did a little bit of praying and crossing our fingers, and it turned out we were okay. But people died in nearby counties that night, Saturday night. It was just quite an experience, and the reason I bother you with all this, I don't want you to think I'm wasting your time, is that it just pointed up to me once again, the critical importance of emergency preparedness, because all of this could just as easily have been coming into Maryland as it was North Carolina and Southern Virginia. We drove past on the way home Sunday a middle school, a brick middle school, that was just totally demolished, and school buses were thrown all over the place like toys, and where several people had died. And so what it gets down to, as I realize, is that communication becomes essential, because these kinds of disasters, even though you know they're coming and you can try to prepare for them, it's when all is said and done, an individual, no matter where they live or where they work, is basically just got to hope that something suddenly just doesn't come out of the sky. And it just means that none of us, we read about these things and it's often like, oh, well, it's way off somewhere else. But this time it was very close to home, at least for my wife and I. And that's, I just mention that because, it just is an important issue that we need to really be paying serious attention to. The second thing was that I had the pleasure of visiting Savannah, Georgia, on this recent trip, and if anybody's interested in old cities, this is the oldest planned city in the United States. founded in 1733, which was designed to have 24 squares in the middle of a grid pattern, and they're all still there. It's absolutely one of the most beautiful cities in America. We also discovered a town about an hour south of Hampton Roads called Edenton, a little town of 5,000 people that, to my way of as far surpasses Williamsburg, Virginia, in its beauty and authenticity, with homes dating back to 1744 that people are living in. So it's not a museum, it's an actual town, and I would encourage people interested in historic preservation, as many are in Tacoma Park, to go visit that. It's not that far away, and it is a delight. That was all I really wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Mr. Schultz bringing up the experiences that he had with the recent tornadoes. And I hope that it motivates people in Tacoma Park to renew their efforts for emergency preparedness, because this area is certainly as vulnerable to those types of storms as any other area in the country. On another subject, I know everyone considers the Independence Day celebration here in Tacoma Park to be extremely important. It's been, I think this is the 122nd year we're going to be celebrating Independence Day with parades. We also have someone sneaking in. And of course, we also have the fireworks display and music in the evenings on Independence Day. But I did want to let my colleagues on the council know and the community know that this is a large event that takes a lot of resources and a lot of planning. I think many of you knew that Belle Ziegler, who past Director of Recreation Department here in the city, and after her retirement spent almost full time planning the Independence Day activities. She passed away a couple years ago, but I did want to let the community know that the committee this year that organizes that event is having to look at scaling back the event some because of reductions in donations and also insufficient volunteers for the event. So I'm still hopeful that we will be able to reach out and get additional donations, and I'm certainly inviting community members to step forward and give us a call and volunteer to do some of the planning and work on the event day. So anyone who is interested in participating, I make it sound like drudgery, but it's not. It's really a lot of fun. We only meet once a month, and it's a good camaraderie among the committee members, and very rewarding when the event is over. So if anyone's interested in participating, I invite them to give me a call at 301-565-0190. That's my home phone.
Can they also go to a website?
They can go to the Independence Day website, which you're going to ask me what that is. Search Google. Everybody uses Google. Come on. Tacoma Park Independence Day or Tacoma Park 4th of July. And you should find it. And again, you can email me at terrys@tacomagov.org. Thank you.
And before we're finished with council comments, Councilmember Siemens will have used Google, searched for it, and tell us what the address is. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you. I want to welcome back Councilmember Schultz. You look refreshed and reinvigorated.
Thank you.
Just want to mention, I think this has been mentioned before, but on May 1st is the House and Garden Tour here in Tacoma Park. It's going to be in Ward 1 this year on Maple, Cedar, Tulip, Holly area, which is some of the original development area and houses that Gilbert envisioned. It's exciting. There's many places you can buy tickets. It is May 1st from 1 to 5 p.m., but there's local businesses you can buy tickets at. You can buy them at Mark's Kitchen, Now and Then, and the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Food Co-op, as well as at the Farmers Market People are out there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Sundays selling tickets, so I'd encourage people to go if they like that sort of thing. It's usually a wonderful tour. I'm sure it will be again this year. The third thing I just want to mention is related to environmental issues. You know, I've been pushing for the Green Deal for Tacoma Park, and I think one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is that when we discussed this as a council, we really looked at the Task Force on the Environment recommendations. Many council members supported many of those recommendations, and some of those recommendations would cost money. And I do remember hearing quite a bit of concern about whether we could afford some of those recommendations. And I think now, based on the budget numbers we've seen and the budget situation not being as grim as I think many of us thought it might be, it's still tough, but it's not the budget game scenario where we'd have to look to cut $1 million. And so I just think we should realize that as we think about what our opinions were about those, and it does seem like there is a way to find funds available to do that, and I think we should make sure to have in the budget process, I guess it'll be during reconciliation, a full opportunity to debate that and again judge that whether we can afford it or not. I just want to particularly point that out to the city manager. I think definitely people have expressed concern about the cost before, but I think opinions may have changed from that time based on the overall budget situation. And then lastly, I also wanted to request specifically, I know we talked about it last week, I'm not sure if it's on the city attorney's list of things to do rapidly, but it seemed like there was a desire by the council to get a read on what the definition of public safety was related to the speed camera fund, because there was some proposals up here last week related to that, and seemed to be some uncertainty from city staff about what that opinion would be, and I just think it would be important to have that during our budget deliberation process. To me, if you're talking about spending money on things like teen programs or job programs that are particularly targeted at youth that are, you might be concerned, could be drawn into gangs, that definitely seems to me like a expenditure that's related to public safety. Many people in law enforcement say enforcement is necessary, but you can't totally enforce your way out of the problem, and that enforcement along with other approaches often works best. And to me, that seems like a very valid public safety approach. But I would like, since there seemed to be some debate about that last week, what public safety means, because that's all it says in the state laws, must be used for public safety, that we get a judgment about what that specifically means. Thanks.
I would support that request. And
You have an answer?
In answer to the mayor's question, the website for the Independence Day activities is www.tacomapark4th.org. That's tacomapark4th.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Clay.
I won't repeat all the things that Councilmember Wright said, but I will add one thing to that, and that is that the way that the budget discussions are set up year after year, we have the presentation of the budget, and 2 or 3 different departments come before us every evening, and we hear their presentations, and we have some questions, and the time period for the council members to really affect significant change in the budget comes over just 1 or 2 meetings. And it's always rushed, and it compresses the conversation and compromise time. And I think that there is significant interest on the part of several of the council members to have this larger conversation about the change in direction with some of the funding, really taking a meaningful approach to the sustainability issue, and the Green Deal and all of the different aspects. I mean, when you think about the things that we're talking about, they're pretty broad. They cut across all of the different entities, from the Public Works Department to Housing and Community Development and Recreation and all of those things. And so I really feel like if we're going to be successful at having a meaningful conversation about this, where we get to a good end and not a rushed kind of final product where we just maybe, come up with some money to hire a green coordinator and punt it into the next budget round, to use some of the sort of federal debate terms that have been going on, that's not going to be satisfactory. And to be successful, we're going to have time in the agenda over more than just 2 meetings. I think it's going to have to be meaningful time. So that's my third pitch for that. Moving on, I want to let senior citizens know that the time period is open for the low-income housing credit on your taxes, and so you can file with the state and get a discount on your property taxes. And I think they call this the circuit breaker for senior citizens. But there's income qualifications, and you have to apply. And the deal is that homeowners who file and qualify by May 1st will receive the credit directly on their tax bill, or as a credit certificate issued at the time the property bill is mailed. So there's some advantage to getting it in by May 1st. If you can't get it in by May 1st, you can still get it. The secondary time period is open from May 1st until September 1st. And so applicants that file after May 1st are advised not to delay payment of their property tax bill until the receipt of the credit they wish to receive as a discount for early payment offered in subdivisions. So a refund check would be issued by the local government if the tax bill was paid before the tax credit was granted. So there's a website that I'm going to send out on the Ward 2 list tonight, but if you're listening on the line here, there is a phone number that you can call, and it's 1-800-944-7403, and that'll get you to the application. I've been talking to some of the senior citizens in my area and talking to them about how to get onto the website, and they're like, I'd have to call my children, and so then I go back and print it out for them. But you can call yourself. So the phone number is, where did it go again? 1-800-944-7403, and I'll send this link out to the other council members so you guys can send it out on your lists as well. Bagot is going to be screening here on April 28th at 7:30, and it's co-sponsored by the City Council that graciously provided the space for the screening, and myself and Joe Edgell and Milford Sprecher, and Terrell North. And so we would love to have you come on down. I'll be there for the first half hour, and then I have to go off to a folk festival meeting. But I hope that people will come. They're doing a ticketing. They're actually providing tickets to the event. It's free, but they want to count how many people are coming in. So I'll send a notice out about that if you haven't already seen it. I think it would be worthwhile to find out regarding the Ethan Allen issue is. So we could pull the permit and cause ourselves more misery. Is there any mechanism in the law that allows us to fine the Washington Gas or their contractor? And we should find out if there are other sanctions beyond just torturing ourselves by pulling the permit that we could engage in.
I'll check with the city engineer. I know that he's been investigating many options.
Good. Some good news. I got lots of positive feedback, and thanks to the council from the folks in the Aspen Court apartments over the efforts that we made to make sure that the 12 remaining families from those apartments are secure during the transition, and that their affordable rent rates under the rent stabilization ordinance are secure, and have had very positive interactions with the Housing Opportunities Commission since then. They've been a little bit delayed on getting the money to redo the vacant building and some of the other activities, and they think it'll be about 4 months before they're ready to actually start leasing the existing buildings to people, and probably more than a year before they'll have the completely vacant building redone. But that is good news for people in Ward 2, and good news for the city, and certainly good news for the people that have been living there, so thanks to the council for the extra support from that. And the last thing is that there are 2 meetings that need to be set up in Ward 2, and I just want to give a reminder to the deputy city manager and the city manager. And one is that the Public Works Director said that we would have a sidewalks meeting in May, and so we need to get that meeting set up because the SOSCA people would like to announce it in the newsletter that they're going to distribute, and that's actually a great way for us to get more notification out because they hand deliver those to all the folks in the SOSCA area. And the other one is on the tree issue for Woodland Avenue. As you'll recall, we said that we would be able to swap the trees out if we had a majority of people. Well, there were 7 people with trees. 5 of them responded that they would like to swap out the trees. One of them said that they weren't very excited about it because of the cost, and the other one I didn't get an answer on. The neighbors have agreed to replant the trees, and so they've agreed to move the existing sweet gum trees into the wooded area, and so we need to work with them to find a place where they won't be overtaken by invasives. And we need to set up a meeting with those folks then to talk about how we're going to let people on each street have a say in what kind of trees that they get and come up with what the tree options are for that side of Woodland. And hopefully, with the change in the trees, more people will agree to have a tree on Woodland Avenue. That would be nice. Thank you.
And I've got a couple things. First, I was talking today with Recreation Department employee Faye Wright, who is coordinating the program during the spring break for public schools this week, where teens can get jobs, helping people in town do yard work and things like that, doing spring cleaning. So she said that she had a lot more teens who were interested in that than she had jobs for them to do. So if my colleagues know of anybody who might use that help and wants to talk with her about having some teens come and work on their yard or whatever it is that they need, she's looking for jobs for the kids to work on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week. And she asked if I would give her cell phone number so that people could call, and sooner is better than later, and her cell phone number is 240-687-4130. And she would welcome calls. She has teens ready, willing, and able to do work this week while they're on break from school. I also wanted to mention that the Azalea Awards were held in this room on Saturday night, and were very successful. It was a full house, and everybody enjoyed themselves, and I think they were great fun, and good job to the Tacoma Foundation and to Councilmember Robinson. And was that Tacoma Zone, or was that just a piece?
It was a piece.
A piece of that.
Dave, Dan, and Zach.
Okay, and the Tacoma Voice for sponsoring that. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I attended the event also, and I thought it was very well organized. It was a fun thing to be at, and I was impressed with the size of the crowd. We filled the chambers here, or the auditorium. And of course, the music was excellent.
And filled it after only about 2 hours after a big thunderstorm.
That's right. Yeah, and I was surprised to see so many people show up after a big clap of thunder. But I also comment on the music. It wasn't just the music was good, but every tune they played had to do with the award winner in some way or another. It was very clever. I congratulate you, Mr. Robinson.
Retail music. Yeah.
And I also just wanted to mention that I received a letter from State Highway Administration on Friday, I guess, in response to the issues around 410, and that the city will be looking at that letter, will be formulating a response that came from Neil Peterson, the head of the State Highway Administration, And so I look forward to our working through the details on that process and trying to get 410 fixed as soon as possible. And I think this response from State Highway Administration goes a good bit of the way toward getting us there. So I look forward to us working through that.
When are we going to get that?
We got it, and you have it in your packet.
Oh. I didn't stop by upstairs before. I
Yeah,
came down.
it's there. And it's a detailed proposal.
Great.
And finally, just to respond just for a second to some comments this evening about the budget process, I just want to say that I think we have made some changes to the budget process over previous years. I think we've front-loaded some of the discussion more. We started some of our budget discussion in January. We also had a budget discussion, I think it was in February, where we gave some direction to the city manager about what we wanted to see in the budget. There are still some discussions that we need to have. We have our second additional budget work session scheduled for Wednesday. I'm more than happy to schedule another one if you all want to do that. We could do it next week, obviously not on the 28th when we're doing the Bagot and Councilmember Clay has the Folk Festival, but we could always go for the 27th. We could find another evening if we need to do that. And I'll just say that I think that the process we have can work for us. I have something in the discussion tonight where I feel like, gee, there's a place to find some money to do some things. And I think this process can get us there. And I think that as we look at ways that we can implement the Green Deal for Tacoma Park or environmental initiatives or sustainability coordinator or anything that we want to do, I think that it will be relatively easy to make some changes to do that, and I think we just need to have the discussion on how we want to get there and have a realistic sense of what it is that we can do. And I hope we will continue to have those discussions, and I will facilitate additional discussions if we need to do those.
Great, thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate your willingness to add that time. I hope my council colleagues want to do that as well. I found the discussions in January, February helpful also to start earlier, but it also, there is an element of if you don't see the numbers, if you don't know what the situation is, it's hard to gauge the trade-offs, and I think that's really what budget time is about, is the trade-off. So I agree with you that we can do it within the structure. We may need to add a little time, and I appreciate your flexibility.
Okay, City Manager, comments?
Yeah, just a couple items. One thing I would just note, excuse me, in terms of the budget process, is obviously one of our largest revenue sources is real property taxes, and we do not get information from the state until about the third week of February, second or third week of February. So that in and of itself is somewhat of a limiting factor. Obviously, at the February meeting, unfortunately, not all the council members could be there. At that point in time, the direction I did receive from a majority of the council was that I was not to cut services, cut staff, or to add staff. Certainly, as you get more information, the council's opinion could change, but that was the direction I had received back in February in terms of putting together my recommended budget. In regard to the legal opinion on the speed camera fund, Jesse was just doing some quick checking for me because we were a little puzzled. That was actually sent by email to the council on February 18th. We can certainly redistribute that.
Does that specifically tell us what the definition of public safety is? Okay.
That was actually the legal opinion that the council itself had commissioned in regard to that specific issue. Last item I had, just kind of a very brief update on the Public Works facility renovation. We are still on schedule to be done within that year time frame, which is the first week of August. Obviously, we still have quite a bit of construction time left to go, and certainly all the rain has been a little bit problematic. One of the things, as they were doing some roof work, it wasn't deemed to be a full roof replacement, but when they did kind of rip off some portion of the roof, we did have more damage underneath than we had anticipated. We are in the process of getting some pricing for that, and hopefully I can have that for you perhaps on Wednesday. We obviously had some funding in the equipment replacement reserve before the renovation was planned, so I don't know necessarily that, depending on the amount of work that has to be done, that it will need to tap the construction budget. because that was some work that we had anticipated through the equipment replacement reserve. But did just want to flag that for you. That was something that just came up on Friday, and we'll have some more information hopefully for you Wednesday evening. But so far, everything's going pretty well, and we're on schedule. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions, City Manager? Okay, legislative update.
Don't have too much to report. Some of the folks have been catching up on their sleep, who worked on that. Mr. Jeffson, I see you're awake, so that's a good sign. He spends plenty of his time there, so familiar with that. The governor still has to sign off on a number of bills. When we get the full list that affect us, that will be passed out to you, and when we get a report from our lobbyist. I do want to mention about the bill that allows municipalities to take down signs on state highways and charge the people who own the signs money for that amount. For that, something probably will be coming for you, because one of the provisions of the bill is that the municipality may enforce this only by the issuance of a warning for the first 3 months after initiating a sign removal program. So we'll need to set up a sign removal program, kind of probably by resolution. We'll be looking at that, and then we'll be able to go forward with the project after the 3-month warning.
And your comments reminded me, remind my colleagues that this Thursday evening is the monthly Montgomery chapter meeting, and it's in Poolesville. And among the guests who are going to be speaking are relatively new council members, Reamer and Rice. They will both be at the meeting. And there's going to be a presentation from Pepco about the new smart meters that they are required to be putting in, and they're going to start very shortly, and so they wanted to give some information so that if questions come up. That's all going to be happening, I think, in the next 2 months. So 7:30 in Poolesville, and they're supplying sandwiches. And anybody who needs a ride to Poolesville, I will be driving there. It takes about 50 minutes on a good night with no traffic. So, yeah, so it'll take longer. We'll now move to the budget work session, and the first section we're going to be working on is general government. City Manager, want to start us off?
I think this is, probably council's already aware of this, but there are a number of divisions that are encompassed under the general government umbrella. There is the legislative budget, which essentially is where the council salaries and some of the council-related expenses are held. General management, which is actually my office, and related support staff. Finance, legal services, information systems, human resources, and the city clerk's office. So with the exception of council and legal, it's primarily kind of administrative support functions to other departments. Not a lot to write home about in terms of the general government budget. It's fairly status quo. The overall budget is up by approximately $40,000 or 1.6%. Personnel cost increases of about $92,000, which is attributable to fringe benefit costs, specifically employee health insurance, as well as the increased contribution for the state retirement system that you've already heard about from a lot of other departments, is offset by reductions in other expenditure categories. Like many of the city budgets, general government is largely a budget of people. About 70% of the general government budget is personnel related. Legal services constitutes about 8% of our departmental budget. And then, as you probably look through some of the budget information, you'll probably have noted that there's a lot of contractual expenses associated with general government. In addition to legal services, we have software licensing, technical computer support, preparation of the comprehensive annual financial report, the financial audit, our contractual lobbying assistance. So that constitutes a pretty large percentage of the general government budget as well. Just kind of touch briefly on some of the highlights. Some of this is already captured in the budget documentation, but just to draw a couple of things to your attention. In the legislative division, once again, which is where the council's compensation is housed, that budget is up by almost $13,000. One thing just did want to call to your attention, because it does affect most of you personally. There has been a change in state law, and state law now mandates that elected officials in the state basically be part of the state retirement system. That is with one exception. This is basically people who took office, I sense Yvonne can correct me if I'm wrong, since 2004, I believe. Is that correct? Since 2004. Obviously, Councilmember Siemens has served continuously during that time, so you would be exempt from this. Mayor Williams is only subject to it because he changed offices during that time period. But what this means is that the city will be required to contribute to the state retirement system on your behalf for the 6 of you, and similarly, each of you will have to contribute the required percentage of an employee, which will be going to 7% as of July 1st. So that accounts for $10,000 of the increase in the legislative division budget. The other area of increase in this budget has to do with election costs. I think as everyone's aware on the dais, there will be a municipal election this coming fall. There's $15,000 included in the legislative division budget for election-related expenses. And I had asked Jessie if maybe she could just touch very briefly on some things that they will probably do a little bit differently beginning this year.
Sure. There shouldn't be much different from the last election. It'll look very similar. Essentially, we're planning to use Scantegrity again for this election. That's provided by the Voting Systems Institute, and there will be still no cost to the city for this service. We will be asked to pay for ballot printing this time. We've requested a bit more than in the 2009 election, a bit more funding, and that would be to allow for 2 mailings to registered voters instead of only 1 mailing. We found the 1 mailing to be really effective. I think a second mailing earlier on would help to remind people that there is an election coming up. And other costs that are involved in the election are the election judge stipends and food, the mailings, the required notices in newspapers, the printing of ballots, as I mentioned, translation services, and some miscellaneous supplies. So that's basically what is involved in funding the election. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm just going through, I'm sorry.
I was occupied for a minute, and so I didn't hear something that you said, and if you could repeat it. Councilmember Siemens was pointing it out to me about the pensions for elected officials. It's
what is it subject? It's due to a change in state law.
Yeah, right. Have we determined exactly how it's going to settle out?
We will be doing it prospectively as of July 1st, and basically it will apply to anyone who has either assumed office since 2004 or has changed offices, such as yourself. Right. So it will be applicable to 6 of the 7 of you.
And you were mentioning a percentage?
The contribution as of July 1st for any participant in the state retirement system is a 7% payroll deduction.
That means we're eligible when we retire.
If you meet if you're staying off for long enough to vote.
5 years?
That's something actually Yvonne mentioned that I'm going to need to check on, because obviously there was just a change in the state pension law. And I think part of that may have been a change in the vesting schedule for new people coming into the system. So I need to check to see whether that is now 5 years or 10 years. So anyway, I will check with the state this week and see what I can find out to confirm that.
And we're doing it prospectively. Have we determined anything about retroactive?
I don't know if we have heard anything definitively. This was a law passed prior to my tenure with the city that we just became aware of through the state audit process that was done. What the city had requested is to avoid kind of truthfully a hardship for anybody who was a participant, as well as just the city itself, is that it be applied prospectively, because truthfully the state retirement system did such a lousy job of notifying people that MML wasn't aware of it, and no other city that I can find out who was a participant in the state retirement system was aware of the law either. So we had asked that it be applied prospectively, and to the best of my knowledge, no one has come back and said that was a problem.
And the law took effect on what date?
I believe it was
July
passed...
1st, 2006?
No, it's 2004. It was prior to my...
2004.
Yeah, I think the law got passed in the legislative session just prior to my starting with the city.
Okay.
So.
And so if we did it retroactively, that would be 7 years
You could already
prior.
retire.
Correct.
Therefore, if the old requirement was 5-year vesting, somebody might already be vested.
It's possible.
And if if one is not contributing for the vesting period, what happens to the
Well,
amount
one
that
would
they...
have to one
You'd
would
have to
have to
do
pay
retroactively.
retroactively.
I understand, but if we go going forward, if one isn't
Doesn't vest.
contributing for the entire vesting period and stops, what happens to the money that they've contributed towards the pension?
Any contribution made by a participant is your money and will be remitted to you upon your termination in the plan.
I see.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like you either put it in and get it back, or you put it in and vest.
And vesting means the other 93% comes back to you at a later date. Is that correct?
Correct. Or whatever the system is.
Correct, yeah, and we can check on that.
It means we might want to know a few more details about the state pension system that a number of our employees have.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see, I was going to...
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Just touch briefly on some of the other divisions. General Management Division, which is essentially my office as well as some of the front desk reception staff. Budget is actually down by about $9,000. The cost of fringe benefit increases was offset by decreases in other accounts, specifically some contractual costs, including Nancy Lane Services. She's a consultant who's been helping us this year with the hospital certificate of need application process. I tried to call this out both in my budget transmittal letter as well as the cover sheet. Did not include any funding in my recommended budget for the resident survey. We have historically done that biannually. Wasn't quite sure kind of how the numbers were all going to shake out, and after what happened last year with the county, was a little concerned about funding that. I do think from a staff perspective, the resident survey has been very helpful in getting feedback from residents. It is the only statistically valid way we have of getting sort of a cross-section of the community's opinion. And I think particularly with some of the cutbacks we went through last year in staffing, which has certainly, unfortunately, on occasion slowed down responses, it would be helpful, I think, to get that kind of feedback. If the council does not feel that you want to add this item through the reconciliation process, I would strongly encourage us to make sure that we do the survey at least on every 3 years, just to not lose some of the progress we have made in tracking results. Some of the other division budgets, Finance, Information Systems, Human Resources, City Clerk, certainly would be happy to answer any questions, but basically the changes in those budgets are either primarily or solely attributable to the increases in fringe benefits, once again due to employee health insurance and the increase in the state retirement system contribution. I did want April to maybe talk a little bit about some disaster recovery and the fiber connectivity project that's in the special revenue fund, but before we do that, I guess it might be helpful just to sort of stop and see what questions the council may have in terms of any other aspects of the general government budget.
Oh, there's a light for the mayor. I just have a couple quick comments that I jotted down as I went through all this. I just want to say that I thought as I looked at the numbers that the money that we spent on having a contract lobbyist was well worth it, that the results from that, I think, will continue to pay dividends this year and in out years, and I think that's just a really good use of our money and some great results. I note that the amount that we pay for association dues is relatively minor, and I think we get good bang for our buck with both MML and Council of Governments, and that the conference and training budget is always valuable as well, and I know that that may have been reduced over the years as we've tried to save some money, but I think that's also a good use of money, that conferences and training really are valuable. I noted something in here about the the figures on the employees who use direct deposit, and I just wanted to remind folks that there was the direct deposit bill that passed the legislature this year that might enable us to up that percentage. And is the e-comment system the thing that we talked about that was going to be part of the package with the Granicus?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that wasn't some different piece. And I'll just, one final comment is that as I looked at some of the figures on what we have in the IT section, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I guess I was, that we have 50 servers. And I thought, gee, that's a huge number. And I guess that's maybe to be expected if you know those things. I'm not necessarily a server guy, but and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, gee, that's quite the number. Councilmember Wright.
I had a quick question. Will you remind me, if you're not in the city, you pay like $375 to Montgomery County a year? Is that correct? For oh, sorry, I had the wrong set of questions I was thinking through. Yes, okay, sorry.
Yes, just to be able to look at us on TV.
Yeah.
$375.
The first was related to the admin position. I just, in the general government section, there's city manager, deputy city manager, there's an executive assistant, and then administrative assistant. And my understanding is that person isn't supporting you guys, and just wanted to make sure that clear to people that they man the desk and answer telephones and do a whole host of, maybe help with passport issues and that sort of stuff.
That's correct. The 1.5 FTEs, this was a reduction from part of the budget cuts from last year that I made. The one person comes in the morning and basically works, normal 8:30 to 5 hours, basically. Staffs the reception desk, answers phones, greets people, is a passport agent. The half-time position comes in the afternoon and basically supplements rec staffing during the hours after school when we're particularly busy with kids. And also will staff the desk in the afternoon when the rec position will sometimes go and lead classes up on the field, sports classes. But that's correct. They don't. I mean, we may occasionally have them do some tasks that they can do at the desk, but they're pretty much tied to that desk and are generally not providing support to Suzanne or to myself.
And then the other question I had is related to cloud computing. I noticed in the report that we're trying to use cloud computing more, and I wanted to kind of get a sense of where we thought that was useful. I know that's kind of like the buzzword in computing now, is like things going to the cloud, and just wanted to get any perspective on how Tacoma Park is using that. Is it an opportunity for us to save money, that sort of stuff?
Abel, could you answer that, please?
This is my turn. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I want to answer that, and I want to tell you about a couple of things that we're doing in the IT. Kind of briefly mentioned in the documents tonight. We got a couple of projects that are related to disaster recovery. And I can speak about the cloud computing. It reminded me when Councilmember Schultz was talking about the tornado. We kind of dodged the bullet here in this area. But we are making contingency plans, and we're always thinking about disaster and IT, Plan B, Plan C. But we're actually going to try to break something and try to reenact a disaster with one of our servers and try to recreate it and try to go through that process, at least the IT staff. And it might involve some of the finance staff. The other thing that we're doing that is a big project, it'll probably be the fiber connectivity to Public Works. We want to enhance our connection there and the possibilities of doing even some media events there. But in addition, that will reduce the cost of leasing T1 lines and things that we're doing now to connect to Public Works and to make them part of our local area network. We have some servers up there, Councilmember Omer. That's part of the 50. We have servers in all three of our locations. Some are virtual servers, so physically we probably don't have 50. I I can probably do a little count, but we don't want to have the time now.
I wasn't complaining, I was just remarking.
There's a lot of, almost every application requires a server. The issue with cloud computing, we are doing some of that already. And my approach with cloud computing is use the cloud computing for things that we're not doing. The ability of cloud computing or having someone in the cloud use their resources and gearing up quickly, I want to use for things that we're not doing. The eGov to pay and the credit card payment, that's a cloud computing application where we're going to be reaching out and leveraging on their expertise and their resources. We're already doing it with the recreation stuff, the ActiveNet, that's out on the cloud. It looks like it's part of our network and it acts as part of our internet and our online presence, but it's being serviced out of the servers out in, I believe it's California. The Granicus application and our media streaming is also in the cloud. We go there and Jesse connects remotely to their servers. So we're doing it. We're doing some of that.
Great. The other question I have related to computing is this the time when we talk about the website, or is that when we review communications budget?
That will be during the communications budget.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Al.
But I could mention just one thing when you're asking a question about cloud computing. The other thing that we are looking forward to is putting some of our archival information that we have on our website in a cloud location so that we don't take up our server space with massive documents from 10, 12 years ago, but if somebody wants to look it up, they can do it, and then we're charged a fraction of a cent for their access.
Abel, you're bringing fiber from here to the Public Works, is that right?
We want to install our own fiber, yes.
Is that underground, above ground? Is that how does it work?
We haven't decided. We want to explore that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
probably above ground.
Probably above, yeah. And Hefner's just a half of a skip beyond Public Works. Are you planning on wiring Hefner?
If we're coming down that way, why not? Yes. But if we're using the streets the right of way, but there's other ways of reaching Public Works. So I would like to get someone to do a study or to research that for the city. And as part of this project.
Right. I mean, Hefner, I guess my thinking on that is that it'd be nice to bring broadband to Hefner.
We have broadband there.
Okay.
We have cable.
Okay.
Yeah. And
well, that's not much of an issue.
Right.
Thanks.
Councilmember Schultz?
When you talk about off-site storage of critical city software applications and data files, is this part of the remote, I'm not sure the word, the language, of our moving our increasing our security such that if there's a disaster affecting this building, we can still function?
Correct.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, and so when will this be completed? Do you have a feeling for that?
Well, we're implementing it in phases. Our first, the first thing we want to do is do the financial software. Mm-hmm. To us, that's the most mission critical, and that may be done before the end of the fiscal year with existing funding.
Where physically is this remote?
Well, what we've envisioned is to do a nightly backup to our existing backup server, but also export it to an off-site.
Right.
In addition, we've asked the vendor, and the vendor can provide us with a server, a virtual server, to the one we're using here, where if our server dies, we can just, they already have our data, all we can do is connect to their server. And for that, there's a charge, there's a cost for that.
So it would almost be transparent, though.
It would be, yes.
To the user.
To our users, right.
That's good.
At least for the financial software.
Now, when it says test the computer system's continuity of service plan, is that something that's done just one time, or is that something that's done periodically? Just
ideally, you want to do it periodically. We want to do it once, at least. We want to do it once to start. But yeah, it should be done periodically. You could schedule that.
And when it says increased backup and disaster recovery capabilities, is that what we were just talking about
we're always adding.
Uh-huh.
If we have a server that is not being backed up,
Right,
we're trying to, we're adding it.
right. Just seems to me that this is really important, since, everything we do now is on computers. I mean, nobody ever puts pencil to paper for recordation purposes. And given what I was just talking about in my public comments, or council comments, it just brought it home to me, is that I just hate for us to be vulnerable any longer than necessary. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I know more than I really wanted to know about this stuff because of my federal job. On the continuity of operations, does that include, it's actually a question for the city manager, really, does that include continuity of operations for the city government as well? It does? Okay, so the plan does include it?
Yes, it does.
I remember we had some discussion of this on a previous
Right,
occasion.
there's a kind of a full-blown plan that deals with a number of operations, but certainly I think the part that Abel deals with is our ability to function safe. This building was destroyed.
Right.
Yes, but it's certainly broader than just the data, the IT functionality.
And we've had some discussions with the police department also, too.
Right. Right. And then on the cloud computing front, the issue that often, there are several issues that come up, but one of the issues that I want to ask you about is often the bottleneck is the speed of the wiring in the building itself, so that you might have a high-speed connection from the outside of the building to wherever the service is. That might be a nice fat line, but then sometimes we have very old cabling in the building, so that the response time from the person's point of view can be quite slow. Have you addressed that issue? Is that part of the plan?
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the projects that we have in the capital for this year is the updating of our backbone switches.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is get 1,000 speed, 1 gigabyte speed to the workstation.
Right.
And I'll be up here maybe, we say May. The first meeting in May, trying to get that project approved from you guys. We have a Cisco backbone. All of our equipment is Cisco, and what we're going to try to do is update those. I think it's a total of 8 switches and some routers also. The more you add, the more cloud stuff you add, the more connectivity you have to have from the workstation to the cloud. So it does put a load on the. We're also adding a lot more with our media folks. They're doing a lot more of their content is digital. So we're trying to increase bandwidth there so they can do their editing and their media sharing. So all of that will be addressed with the backbone switches that we're going to update.
Because one of the difficulties the Department of Health and Human Services, federal department, has had is that the savings that you supposedly get from cloud computing are often eaten up by the enhancements you have to do to the internal wiring and switches and cabling and so on in order to make use of that.
Yeah, I mean, the cloud is a wonderful thing, and it's the latest buzzword, but you also have to have people watching what the cloud is doing. I mean, you need that, and you need to be able to communicate, like you said.
The second question I had concerned when you write these agreements with the cloud folks, well, the issue that I've observed is the providers have little incentive to tell you when they're having a problem or that they've had a problem. And it is possible to write contracts that, make that more likely, increase the incentives for it. and so on, just to name Google, and some other services were hit pretty badly, and then all of a sudden people were surprised to discover that, their cloud services were down. And there was no mechanism for letting them know how long they would be down or what the problem was, how it got resolved, and so on, because these providers have, unless you do something, they don't have any incentives in those directions. So
they want to hide it from you.
They want to hide it from you. They have every incentive to hide it.
We've been fortunate. The folks that we are doing cloud computing with are very responsive. Granicus, for instance, to me, I think they're more than willing to tell us, we had a problem. Even when they're going to schedule maintenance, they're telling us. And they had a major issue at the end of the year, beginning of this year. And all through the whole process, we're being told we're doing the backup, we're restoring. They have a lot of redundancy in their system. So we've been lucky with them. The other vendors really haven't experienced any problems, and that's why I want to work cautiously. I don't want to be right on the leading edge of this cloud computing thing. Only the things that we need to do that we don't have that we can leverage on. But I don't want to just go all of it in, because I worry about those things.
We call it not being on the bleeding edge.
That's my phrase. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. And security is a related, similar problem, is that they have little incentive to report problems with hackers or viruses or anything like that. It's the same kind of dilemma. So I really appreciate your efforts to go slowly and make sure that this stuff is working.
Okay. Thank you.
Before I go to Councilmember Schultz for another question, I just observe after this discussion that it reminds me that the city has come a long way in not that long.
Yes.
When I first got elected to the council, I think I had the only
Rolodex.
I had the only cell phone that anybody had seen on election day. They didn't know what it was. And it wasn't that many years ago when, well, I'll go back a second. I got email in 1996. An awful lot of people didn't have email in 1996. The council did not do business or hear from constituents via email until later in the 90s. Everything was done in person or by telephone. And I don't know what year, you probably know, Abel, what year the city actually established an IT division. But there were no IT employees for a good bit of my time on the council, and there was no, I believe, line in the budget. There was no, there was no place where you could go and look at what the computer expenditures were. It was just kind of done seat of the pants with extra money to supply some computers. It was very seat of the pants for a long time.
I know that you probably have AOL because that was the only service. Well,
I still have that address.
Yeah,
I don't use it, but it's buried somewhere in everything. But
my earliest email is from 1999, and I've saved all my emails from Group Glass. Yeah. I think it was mostly a DOS version back then.
So to be talking about the speed inside the building to match the speed outside the building and 50 servers and redundancy after redundancy, it's a good bit different than it used to be. Councilmember Schultz, you had a question.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for your help this past week in keeping me connected to the city council last Monday and last Thursday.
Cable guys deserve a little bit of a credit on that one too.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're the person to address this question to, but the lag time between the video and the voice was 70 seconds. And I'm not asking you to fix this tonight. But I'm just wondering if what we're talking about in terms of increasing our in-house broadband capacity is going to be would have any impact on making that stuff more in sync with real time.
That's probably not going to get fixed with this. What happens with you're watching it on the internet, and the audio on the internet follows the video on the internet, but your audio on the phone is more real time. I mean,
Yes,
the phone
it
has
is.
to be real time.
Right,
Or
that's
as
what I
close to real time
use.
as possible. But the internet doesn't.
Yes.
And you're pushing data a long ways,
Uh-huh.
all the way to probably California and then back to your computer. So you were watching it on the delay that it takes for it to go through the internet.
I see. That's just part of the reality of life.
That's today's reality, yeah.
In 2011, it might not be that way 10 years from now. We'll all chuckle about 10 years from now how funny it was back now. Okay, I just was curious, and I don't want to waste any more time on that matter. But thank you for your help with it, though. It worked.
Okay, I think we've covered that area. Oh, sorry.
Turned off my light.
Did I?
You did. Are you sending me a message?
Relight her light.
All right. So here's something that probably didn't happen when you first got elected, Mayor. I'm sitting at the council meeting, and one of my constituents is watching on streaming video, and they sent me an email that I got on my cell phone. that I
And you were
looked-
watching.
Of course, it buzzed. So I picked it up.
And you paid attention as opposed to ignoring it.
Of course I did. So here's the comment. Most of the applications you're discussing are back-end computing discussions. Any front-end computing that the public interacts with must be compatible with Macintosh, iPads, iPhones, and Android devices. Typically, IT folks are trained on Windows and prefer Windows.
Not us.
Consumers are voting with their pocketbooks. I know. Consumers are voting with their pocketbooks, however, for other platforms. Currently, for example, the online streaming video requires Windows Media Player. Windows Media Player is not available for iPads, iPhones, or iMacs. I can watch it on my Mac, however, due to a third-party plugin. But if the city would choose vendors who use standards that are written by standards consortia, then all can use the standards to include HTML5, H.264 video, I don't even know what that is, and various open database formats. So the request is that we accommodate Macs, iPads, iPhone, and Android users for each solution, which we have to do to some extent because this device that you gave me is an Android device.
You got somebody there on the bleeding edge there.
Yeah.
But we
part
wanna
of
do it.
Part
I
of
mean,
the upgrade with the Granicus system is also to help bridge those different kinds of pieces of equipment.
So people with their would be able to see it on their iPads and their Androids and
You can see it on your
whatever
Android
that
now.
264 thing was.
H.264.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
We're getting that standard with the new Granicus.
Oh, good.
We'll have
So
that.
so send it back to them. We're going there.
Well, he's watching, so he's heard it.
With 70 seconds. Bruce probably owns
With
it.
a 70-second delay.
Yeah, so you can send it back before he gets it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
That's it? Okay. We will take a break and we'll come back for Public Works and Stormwater.
don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you.
When you earn your GED diploma, the barriers in your life fall. Take the first step and get free GED information in your area at 1-877-38-YOUR-GED or yourged.org. Earn your GED diploma and begin your brighter future.
Bottom line, what you see proposed for fiscal year 12 is pretty much in line with expenses, both dollars as well as programs in fiscal year 11. No change in staffing, and all our major program emphasis remain. I thought it might be most helpful to go kind of division by division, talk a bit about the highlights and some of the programs that may be of interest to you all. In our building maintenance division, what you see there is some reduction in costs, and that's largely due to a reduction in utility costs. Some of that is based on actual expenses, the dollar value of dollar cost per kilowatt of energy not meeting what I had originally projected, neither last year or the year before. So some of that is just a correction in actual costs. We do purchase our power through Montgomery County, so we have a very competitive rate for power per kilowatt. And of course, as you know, we also buy the 100% wind energy RECs to offset 100% of the electricity use the city uses. I also wanted to point out that we have had solar panels on the administration or the building here for a while now, and just checked the website. We do have a website that shows the daily generation as well as the generation to date since the panels have been set up. We've generated almost 16,000 kilowatt hours of power since they've been put into use. Our annual use for kilowatt hours is a little under 500, about 453,000 kilowatt hours per year, just to put it in perspective. We are looking forward to an opening of our RFP on May 4th for solar power purchase. We advertised for the option of a third party to provide solar panels on the facility here around the community center as well as the Public Works facility. The concept there, and one that's been used very well by the county public school systems and others around the country, it's really picking up speed, is for a third party to own, operate, and maintain the system in exchange for three sort of tangible benefits for them. First being that they sell the power to whoever provides them the roof space at a cost that either is just below or at the cost that the host is currently buying power for, so they have that guaranteed revenue stream based on the actual production of the panels. There's also the ability to get the tax reduction benefits that the city as a government would not be entitled to, but the third party would based on the value of the purchase and the installation. And then lastly, there is a market for solar renewable energy credits, so they can also sell those solar renewable energy credits and gain the value of those. So those are the sort of three factors that interest a third party to engage in a program such as ours. We advertised the bid, started it a couple of weeks ago. We had a pre-bid meeting. I've had strong interest from three solar companies and a fourth that seems interested, so I'm hoping we will receive some competitive results in a couple of weeks, and you'll be hearing more about that as we receive the information. That kind of takes me to the Public Works construction, and Barb had had mentioned that it is on schedule for an August 2011 completion date. The building is emerging, growing from the ground. If you haven't been up there, it's pretty neat to see. We've got ribs and bones and almost some skin, a little bit of roof. The improvements that construction is going to make to working conditions for the staff, as well as longevity of equipment and equipment storage, is kind of tremendous. It's really going to make a huge difference in our operation and in the efficiencies that we can explore, and also just the ability to use the site and have our equipment ready and well-abled to be used as needed is going to make a huge difference, I think, to our ability to continue to operate well in the city. Moving on to equipment maintenance, as I'm sure you all know, we've been increasing our hybrid vehicle purchases over the year. We've actually made a huge dent in our gasoline use as a result of that. We now have 9 hybrid vehicles that are in the city fleet of, I think, about 73 cars. We've dropped, on a monthly basis, we've reduced our gas use by about 500 gallons a month. So in fiscal year 09, we had an average just under 7,000 gallons of gas per month, and now in fiscal year 10, it was 6,500. So I imagine in fiscal year 11, we'll see some slight improvements to that. So we're definitely moving in the right direction as a result of the changes in vehicle use. And there is a hybrid vehicle scheduled for purchase in FY12 as well. For the total for the year, we're just under 80,000 gallons, about 78,000 gallons of fuel a year for vehicles. The other thing that has made a dent in some of that, we've also increased the replacement cycle specific to police vehicles. They had been on a fairly shorter time cycle for police, but in working with the chief, as we took a look at the take-home vehicle policy, as well as the trying to encourage them to more gas-efficient vehicles, we've increased the replacement cycle to 8-year and the mileage to 100 to 150,000, depending on the type of vehicle. For patrol vehicles, it's between 100 and 125. For those support or CID vehicles, the mileage replacement criteria goes up to 150,000. So we think that way we'll get a year or two more for the cars. They're well cared for as a result of being take-home vehicles. We feel like it's been able to combine the best of those goals together. So I just wanted to remind folks of that. In terms of right-of-way maintenance, basically the continuation of the maintenance work around the city goes on. Parks, playgrounds. We recently put into operation the new street sweeper. And again, that's kind of one of those pivotal pieces of equipment that's central to some of what we try to accomplish in our stormwater program. And now that we have a new sweeper, state-of-the-art, wonderful operation, we've been able to use it in a couple of ways, one of which, of course, is the actual street sweeping. And now that we have the reliability that we need, we want to take a look at doing greater promotion to the residents about what zone they're in, what day of the week it is, and what we really want to start pushing that between March and October, since that's when our cycle runs for the sweeper. Prior to the replacement of the sweeper, we're very tentative about wanting to promote that, given the difficulty we were having with operations, and at any given day the sweeper could be down and it took a while to get repaired. So now that we have a great piece of equipment, we're ready to start using the newsletter and other means to promote the sweeping program and really explain to people what the benefit of that is, in addition to just, some people say, it makes it look a little better, or doesn't really do a whole lot, or I see the line down the street when the sweeper comes. But it's actually a critical and pivotal piece of our stormwater management program and keeping the sediment, some of the trash and chemicals out of our stormwater system.
Can I just make a brief comment there? Mm-hmm. The Public Works Director and I were talking about this, last week? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were saying that the North Tacoma neighborhood has something that they're using that it might be a model.
They remind each other in their listservs. Basically, that section of the city has a Monday collection zone, so they remind each other. And there's a few folks that are just really into it, so they remind their neighbors that on any given Monday, the sweeper could come around. Our goal is to twice a month. So, standard you have 4 opportunities through the month. We can't have it out there every day of the month, but our goal is out of 2 of the 4 days available in that month the sweeper will come through there. We run the sweeper on the same zone at each day. So there's a Monday zone, Tuesday zone, Wednesday zone, Thursday, and that's a specific part of the city. So we can advertise that. We can show maps about where the zones are. People can learn which day of the week their street sweeper program operates on, and then plan accordingly as they can to move their car off the street and give us better access to the road.
So I think this will be a great opportunity for all of Tacoma Park to be more involved in improving the environmental sustainability of the city and making the effect of that pass-through by the street sweeper enhanced, just so it doesn't have to bypass cars that would have moved if they had known.
My only question would be, in the case where you have people who can't move their cars because they're at work, let's say, is there any thought to trying to do alternate side of the streets, street sweeping, and those staying in the same zone? Because people sometimes, if you don't have driveways, where do you move your cars?
We could take a look at that. At this point, because we haven't really been able to implement this program as it was originally designed because of operable issues, the sweeper will go on both sides of the street during the scheduled zone. I guess one option would be for a person to put their car in a slightly different place than they did the previous day of the week, the previous week's day, as a potential option for improving the ability of our sweeper to get to the curb. One of the things we've been trying to do, because it's like a lot of other things. We've got a lot on our plate, a limited number of staff, and so we can't devote one staff person every day of the week to drive the sweeper for an entire month. So we try to balance it as best we can with the other duties. So it gets to be, we like to maintain the flexibility depending on what's going on, and pick for ourselves which week we think we can get the sweeper out and track it and make sure that we're getting coverage of a zone equally from one part of the city to the next. So at this point we think it's kind of, we'd like to continue to explore the way we currently got it designed and see if we can accomplish what we're hoping we can. We'll be tracking the tonnage that we sweep off the streets. We haul that. It has to go to the incinerator. It goes to a solid waste facility. It's not something that can be put into our compost pile or anything else. It's contaminated waste given the location it was swept up on. So we'll be tracking that and using that in our NPDES annual report in terms of what we're accomplishing. It's remarkable that we are able to have the coverage that we have. When I look at Montgomery County, which has got a very aggressive and really exciting program being developed for stormwater management and the watershed implementation plans, the street sweeping is once a year. Right. Once a year. You kind of want to say, why bother? But at any rate, I don't mean to cast aspersions at all. They've got a great program going, but it really shows that what we're able to do here is something that it actually is, can really make a difference in terms of water quality. Next division is our solid waste office. And I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but our move to single stream recycling has really assisted with the efficiency of our collection program in terms of meaning less trips to the transfer station where we deliver the materials. As sometimes we can put 2 days' worth of collection in one truck. It also means that we have one truck going out daily versus the 2 trucks we had before. So part of that 500 gallons of fuel, reduced fuel use per month is born out of that sanitation division by having fewer trucks on the road to do the job. You'll see in the numbers there in sanitation, we've identified the tonnage of trash, tonnage of recycling, tonnage of yard waste. Those numbers are always a little bit confusing in that because we're a division-run budget, that's the solid waste division. So what you see there is about 70% of what they collect is trash, about 17% is recycling, and about 13% is yard waste. That only includes the Monday yard waste collection program. It does not include our vacuum leaf collection program, which of course triples what we pick up on the Monday program over the course of the year. So if you were to add the vacuum leaf collection program, which is done by the right-of-way division, into the total numbers, you'd increase, of course, your overall tonnage, but you bump up to a yard waste collection of about 30% of the waste stream versus what it currently looks like now in that solid waste. So I just point that out because I know for some folks, our goal is certainly to try to get to a 50-50 type situation, and we're very close to that. I would say we're about 47% in the recycling and yard waste and 53% in the trash collection. So our program, has been since its inception and continues to be a very successful program, very well supported. You couldn't have those numbers without the involvement of the residents there, the folks that make those numbers happen. And the move to single stream has greatly helped in terms of our coordination and efficiency. Moving on to the garden division, I've certainly heard a lot of compliments lately about the gardener's work and the gardener's division work, and I think it's one of those things that when you drive through any given area, kind of demarcates when you're in Tacoma Park and when you're in an unincorporated area of the county. The kind of attention that we can provide to some of our green space, I think, is reflected in that division's work. I also wanted to point out, and I'm sure you all already know this, but the collaboration that we have between the Gardens Division and our stormwater management program is evident in a lot of those new gardens that have been established. We'll talk more about the stormwater programs in a bit, but this year alone we've added 5 bioretention basins around the city, 2 of which are around this building, and the Gardens Division has been an integral part of basically creating something that's really lovely in addition to being very functional and helping us meet our stormwater water quality goals. Then, of course, is the Urban Forest Division, and what you see in this year's budget, in next year's budget, is a proposal to provide a $50 subsidy for the bulk buy tree program. The bulk buy tree program has proven to be a very effective way of getting trees planted on private property, about 70 trees a year are purchased through that program. We've got another one coming up shortly. I can't remember what the deadline is. Probably fast approaching, if not already. So that proposal is to take $50 from the tree fund, not from the general budget, but from the tree fund, which is generated from the payment of fines, and permit fees, and tree replacement payments, to be put towards the bulk buy program to subsidize the purchase of that trees. And those trees are usually, I'm blanking on the price now, but I think $200, $225 or dollars for the planting of basically about a 2-inch caliper tree, nursery stock, guaranteed for a year, and planted by the vendor on your yard. That's
varied by tree, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Trees, and then they got changed to 2 different ones, and it changed her.
Yeah, some of that also. Yeah, there is some variable by tree. We do that by bid. And so the price that Todd gets sometimes varies tree to tree. It just depends on how difficult it is to find a particular tree in the nursery.
And so this program gets the tree planted or gets you the tree?
Gets the tree planted. It's the purchase and the installation of the tree and the guarantee for 1 year. We've been running that bulk buy tree program now. I think we're in coming up will be the 4th year. I think this is the 3rd full year cycle.
I hadn't realized that it got it planted.
Yes.
You get a little flag, right, and you put the flag in the location where the tree is supposed to be planted, I think is the process now.
Oh, in terms of, well, there's when people fill out the little form and send in their check, oftentimes they'll include drawings and locations. Todd will also go out, check each location and confirm with the resident where they want it, and then he puts the stake in the ground where the tree's to be planted. So yes, they do get installed.
And someone came out from Public Works to the 2 trees that we bought and came home one day and they had removed the wire supports for them and the stakes and everything when they got to that age. I don't know who did that, but it was very nice of them. I'm glad my dog did
I'll have
that.
to ask whether it was the vendor or whether it was something that the arborist had arranged. The other thing I wanted to point out, because it's not immediately apparent, is that also through our Urban Forest Division, it's where we've been operating our invasives removal program, and I think I've mentioned that at a couple of council meetings in the past. We've been putting a great deal of effort and plan a lot more in the future in the Circle Woods area, the Sligo Mill, Poplar Mill area, and also the Columbia Slopes There are a few places where we used to deal with bamboo that we don't anymore because we've eliminated it. Boyd Alley on one section is one. And so finally, we don't have to remember that 2 times a year and go back out and whack down the bamboo only to come back 6 months later and whack it down again. So it is gone. We also did an effort on Boston Avenue, adjacent to the Philadelphia Avenue intersection. There's still quite a bit of ivy there, but there's much less, and the ailanthus that we're growing there have been removed and treated and will no longer come back. So our invasives management removal program is operated out of that division as well. Lastly, we'll be doing some database updates for our tree inventory, taking advantage of some of the new information we've gotten through that LIDAR-based report that Todd had provided a report on. And also, we had it's the upside to a downside. We had a server crash, I don't know how many months ago now, and Todd lost virtually all the history, all the information on our tree permit, tree removal, tree application programs that he had created since starting here. So we had some that was able to be saved and retrieved, and one of the things we'll be doing is rebuilding that database through the use of a consulting firm actually training us on a new program on the computer. So we'll be getting that back up and in use, and then using that technology to update our tree inventory. One of the sideline things we're also always trying to figure out ways to reuse and share information. But in some of the new sidewalk planning work that we've been doing, we now have actual surveys on streets where we never had before. We just had sort of conceptual right-of-way lines, property boundaries. We now have actually demarcated, legal, known survey lines. So as we can, we're incorporating those into our GIS system and making corrections, snapping those lines into the right place. So we'll be helping to It helps. I mean, I just talked with a resident the other day who thought the tree was on his private property. Turns out, based on the survey, it's in the public right-of-way. So, it's a big tree that needs to be removed. It's dead. It will no longer be his problem. It becomes our problem. So sometimes those kinds of details are critical. Lastly, in the public works sector is the city engineer's budget. And the thing that he primarily focuses on, amidst plenty of other things, is the street restoration program. One of the things that I had the pleasure of seeing it, though I don't know if anybody else would have known as they saw it, but our pavement condition survey started today. The van was driving around with all its cameras and technology. I waved heartily at the woman, who probably thought I was crazy, as she drove by. Realized I was captured in film for the future for our database.
Is this sort of like the Google thing that where you can...
Yes, it looks very much like the Google map, the equipment that makes the Google Maps look like it does. There's 2 forward cameras, 3 back cameras, and then some equipment that actually measures things on the pavement as it's driving over it.
So we'll see you with your hand in the air and just a blanked out face.
No. At any rate, that pavement assessment should then be compiled and coming back to us, and that will, of course, then create the ratings of each street that we'll then use in our restoration program. You'll note in FY12 in the capital budget, we're just a little bit under the $500,000 goal that we have for each annual allotment. We have had some changes in the pavement program that we had planned for fiscal year 11. The streets that were originally on the list for this year included Wildwood Avenue, Jackson Avenue, Cheney Drive, and Grant Avenue towards the dead end. 3 of those streets are going to be pushed off because of different conditions. Grant Avenue, of course, with the construction of the park and planning, renovation of the park and planning park, we're on hold for that. That'll be on the list for next year. Wildwood Avenue, we are trying to partner that with the sidewalk program if it comes to fruition. We're having our next 2 set of meetings next week on Tuesday and Wednesday with the neighborhood.
It's Wildwood Drive.
I'm sorry. I know it's Wildwood Drive. If I've said it incorrectly, I apologize.
Okay.
Because the street restoration program requires the replacement of curb and gutter in areas where it's faulty, cracked, sunk, missing, we don't want to go through that effort and expense if we're going to be altering it as a result of a sidewalk installation. So we want to partner those two programs together, and we'll put that on the list for FY12. The streets that will be, and actually in the middle of May is when we're supposed to be starting our pavement program. We'll be doing Cheney Drive, and we'll also be doing a section of Linden Avenue where we did some work relative to the stormwater improvement in the previous year. And then also a section of Old Carroll. Basically, we did a major stormwater replacement there, 150 feet of line, 10 to 12 feet deep. It was probably one of the biggest projects we've done since I've been involved in it. We just completed that, and so that street surface needs to be milled and paved as a result of the construction work. And we will be completing that project with the installation of a bioretention area in the green space above that, which will happen in the next month or so. So that pretty much covers what I had planned to speak about relative to Public Works.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Robinson?
Darrell, can you say a little bit more about what's going on in Poplar Sligo Mill, what your plans are there?
Oh, sure. Well, kind of, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I'll do the shortened version. We had an environmental, Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessment completed, I believe that was last year, which basically took a look at, and is a requirement for kind of a building block for what you've got on a site before you decide what you want to do with it. And through that assessment, they were able to basically confirm what we already know, that there are certain areas of that where there were historic dumping, largely concrete, asphalt pavement, as well as, invasive species that have grown as a result there. One of the worries that we actually have with that space now, and it's something I think we're going to be seeing accelerate over the next 10 years if we don't take some pretty serious and significant action, and you may have already noticed it, residents around there certainly do, because on the Poplar side of the area, we're guessing probably in the late 50s when they redid the underpass in New Hampshire Avenue. Most of that asphalt, concrete, and pavement ended up along the banks of the Sligo Creek stream that is Fertile Branch. And then dirt was put on top of it, and then trees have grown up through it. Because of the nature of how unstable that fill is, the dirt is sifting slowly over time, and with rain and whatnot, the dirt is sifting through the rubble underneath, and the trees are losing their footing, and they're falling. They're dying, and they're falling. We've just taken down, I think, 3 major trees in there in the past month. That condition is going to continue, and unfortunately, there's no solution to it that's it's going to look worse before it looks better. Basically, because of the condition of the rubble underneath, all those trees are going to fail, and the option is to then remove the fill on the banks in order to go back to an original grade.
Is that an option you're considering?
Yes, and then replanting. It's actually, even if we didn't want to, we'd have to, because we're going to have failing trees. I guess the question is whether you let them fail on their own over the next 10 to 15 years, or whether you become proactive, start removing them where you know they're in danger, and then remove the rubble, go back to an original grade, and then replant and restore the area. One of the other causes, and it'll be easier to describe this if we were looking at it, and perhaps we should have a whole presentation on Sligo Mill, Poplar Mill, is on the one side of the stream bank you have the rubble and the trees that have grown up on it. As a result of that, it has changed the, It's changed the pattern of water flow and flood management in the natural area, and it's basically pushed the water over to the other side. And the other side is where you have that very steep slope. So basically, it's eroding the slope. So we're having sediment problems further on downstream on those stormwater pipes under New Hampshire Avenue, because the stream has been pushed to the other side. So we're eroding the bank, which should be protected as a result of this artificial change in the stream bank on the other side. One of the potential risks of something like that, and we've actually got a situation right now, and I've talked to State Highway about it, there are 2 trees that had fallen at some point in the past and washed down, and are, they're inside the channel now under New Hampshire Avenue. They need to be winched out, pulled out, and removed. Otherwise, they're going to continue to serve as kind of a dam, and we could, in a hurricane-type heavy rain situation, be in a situation where that area gets blocked and water starts to raise and flood
I see.
in the area.
Well, you have a plan, and you've described the situation, and this plan can go on for 10 years?
This plan could, hopefully not 10 years. We're hoping about 5 years. One of the things what we've been doing is nibbling around the edges of it. We've done some invasives removal. This year we actually had 2 guys for 3 weeks in there pulling trash, cutting invasives, trying to get it in the worst areas off the trees, so it wasn't, in addition to the other problem I've mentioned with the trees, the invasives climbing up and over and
pulling them
killing
down.
the trees. Yeah.
The other question I had was about stormwater inspections. I know that there was one just on Allegheny. I was driving by there about a week ago, and I asked how they were doing, and they said, it's a wreck down there underneath Allegheny. So you're going to get an inventory of our stormwater pipes, I suspect. And then the ones that are bad, like I suspect the one under Allegheny, what's your plan on repairing or replacing those? And can you do it without digging them up and putting a new one in?
Not usually.
I know there was in situ form which was used for sewage underneath Sligo Creek. Is there something like that for stormwater? Or is that?
In some cases there is. It just depends on the condition of the pipe. The city does and has, since the stormwater program was established, a program where every 3 years a third of the system is TV inspected by a vendor. And in addition to the TV inspection, they also clean and remove debris from those inlets and pipeways that they inspect. So it's a way of completely cleaning a third of the system each year. So then, of course, the 3 years you've gone through the whole system. It also gives us video feed inside the pipes. And so in the event that we have a pipe, it kind of depends on what the problem is. For instance, on Old Carroll, where we just completed the work, the TV camera couldn't even get all the way through there, and we tried from various different sizes, but the pipe had collapsed.
I see.
We had done an in situ form from, if you know Old Carroll, where the private drive is, down to Sligo Creek. That's a lined pipe. But beyond that, the condition of the pipe, or above that, the condition of the pipe was so bad you couldn't run another.
So that's when you had to remove it and
we
replace it.
dug it up and put it in place. So some of it depends on what the problem is. If it's simply leaking between the concrete pipe joints,
That's one thing, Now, so should we be, are there any special concerns that we on the council need to have over the next 5 years as far as stormwater, or are you on track on that with this 3-year?
Well, we haven't started into the stormwater budget discussion yet, but we've got a list of projects that we're going to be working on, then a couple of things then.
Okay,
I'll hold my comments for until then.
Right, there you go. I asked about it only because it seemed like it fit in this part of the budget, but maybe it doesn't at all. But thank you for that information.
Councilor LeClay.
I just want to say that I'm always amazed by the number of things that your department does. And how many of the green things in the city that your department touches. And also to share that I, too, get a lot of compliments about the city gardener and, quite frankly, all of the public works staff. A couple questions. You talked a little bit about some of the issues around the Poplar Mill, I think it's called. Are there any plans around the Long Branch stream watershed area? Because it also suffers from years of illegal dumping, except we mostly know where the dumping came from because there's a trail from the house where it was dumped over the back fence down to the stream.
Well, where we've been working so far is in areas where the city has ownership of the land or responsibility of the land. Not much in Long Branch. There's a couple of sections that we have city-owned right-of-way in the Long Branch corridor, but not a whole lot. Most of it's park and planning. There are a couple of sewer projects that are currently, one finished a while ago and another one about to start that affect that area, which is having an effect on water quality. It's, sewage leaking problem off of Garland and Jackson. But I'm not aware of anything else, but I can check with Ali and Todd and see if they've got something going on that I don't know about.
So do you know, does Park and Planning do they own the stream bed plus something up the?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a lot of like private property keep out signs there, but it's not really private property across the.
It varies. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. There's been some talk about the public safety funds and youth diversion, and Public Works is kind of a natural fit for doing employment activities with youth. And I understand that the city looked at some of these things, and the recreation people talked about it a little bit, but that there are issues around liability and other issues that would make that kind of challenging. I imagine supervision might be a challenge too, but since the city council decided that the Public Works people couldn't use the the gas-powered leaf blowers any longer, and suggested that we approach that with a rake brigade. I see that you're looking at buying battery-operated blowers and trimmers. I have a battery-operated blower and trimmer, and I can tell you that the battery-operated trimmer is very good.
The one we've demoed has gotten
a little better.
High marks. Yeah.
All right, no, that's good. But I mean, that seems like a natural kind of a fit for rake brigade, and with the gardening as well, in terms of doing diversion and providing employment opportunities and career track employment opportunities and that sort of thing. So I would be interested in that sort of thing through Public Works if we were also doing it through other areas of the city. Like I know that the Recreation Department has developed this job bank that relies on folks paying from the homeowner pays, and that absolves the city of liability. But did you look into any of these?
Yeah, it's been a while. Our biggest issue relative to using untrained folks, particularly youth, well, there's several issues. One is we're very small-staffed. So if we have to provide someone to train, overlook, and support a group of youngsters, it really takes away from our ability to complete our work cycle. So we've got the issues of supervision. We've also got the issues of transportation. There are days now where people are searching for vehicles to use to get out, and the kind of trucks we have aren't people movers. They're usually just single-seat cab, so 2 or 3 people in a cab is all you can get if you've got 2 or 3 teens that you're training in addition to your regular staff. We're just not equipped with transportation. We see that issue most often now with our leaf collection program, where we've got to figure out how to get those extra people out to the field with the leaf collection program. So we've got the supervision issue, the transportation issue, the liability issue, which would be my biggest worry of all of those, particularly just given that these are folks that may not have the steel-toed boots, don't have the understanding, and we'd be having to, in addition, provide them safety gear, train them how to use the safety gear, and then also, in addition to try to accomplish our work, sort of make sure they're not getting hurt. It's a bit of a challenge, I'm unfortunately reminded fairly often about how hazardous our work conditions are. We just had a sanitation worker who's got 3 stitches in his pinky finger. He was wearing 2 gloves. Dumped a trash can, piece of glass was in there. It cut through a brown jersey glove and a leather glove, and resulted in stitches to his finger. So it's a situation that we're in day to day that is would make me a little nervous about having teenagers involved. Because what we do is you got to be, know what you're doing.
Right. Well, I wouldn't suggest that teenagers ride on the leaf collection pickup truck or dump trash.
But even mowing a lawn is hazardous.
Right. But probably not raking the leaves is probably not nearly as as hazardous, and shoveling and gardening. It seems like they'd be relatively safe. But if we wanted to pursue such options with Public Works, you have to have transportation for them, you have to have training for them,
And you have to have supervision
for
You
them.
Basically, like when we have a program now where we're working with a development disabled adult, they have a supervisor who works with them. That's their job, to supervise the person's work.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't need that level, but if you were going to be bringing 2 or 3 youth to a job site, you'd have to have a supervisor who was basically geared just towards making sure they didn't get in trouble and knew what they were doing, had the equipment they needed and training they needed, and got to and from where they were going.
Well, I work with an agency that does this work across the country every day, where they train young people to do these kinds of things, and they work out the logistics, but they're not mowing lawns, and they're not riding on leaf trucks or collecting trash. They're doing other kinds of environment, like the Friends of Sligo Creek cleanup days and things. Okay. The website says that there are compost bins available in partnership with Montgomery County. They're not very exciting compost bins, I understand.
No, they're just rolled plastic circles that bolt together, and you can throw your stuff in it. Very low tech.
Okay. I know a lot of people would like to see the city have some kind of a compost bin program. It'd be nice, especially if we could do it like in partnership with ACE or the co-op or something. It'd be something to think about. And also that people would like to see the city's compost delivery. They talk about the quality of compost, and they say the city's compost is not as good for gardens as it is for maybe just keeping down weeds in your yards, and so they have compost delivered from different places around the county. And apparently the difference is sifting the... Is there some...
No, it's probably the age of the material and how decomposed it is. Basically, we collect in the fall, and we grind, and then we're making it available in the spring and summer. So that stuff is still in the process of decomposing. It's off-gassing nitrogen, it's off-gassing ammonia, it's not stable. What you get in a store is something that you're looking for to put your garden in. It's more stable, it's already broken down, and it just provides the nutrients to the plants. Ours is still in the process of decomposing, and it can actually leach things from the soil. What we advertise it as a soil amendment or soil enhancement, so you basically put it on top for weed control, or if there's an area that you want to improve the soil, you add it to it, shovel it in, dig it around, it's going to make your soil better, add air, add nutrients for the future.
Okay. 2 more things. Still interested in the, pay to throw trash, and would like to see a way that we could find the funds to initiate that this year, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that when we talk about sort of more comprehensive environmental approaches, but that's definitely something that I would like to see us do, and a lot of folks would like to see us move to. I would be particularly excited about having a very large recycling trash bin that had a lid that flipped over on it rather than the open yellow bins, because wind blows and I get a lot of stuff that blows around even with trying to keep it covered. And the last question is on the solar panels on the community center, the ones that are currently up there, we get all the benefit from that solar energy, right?
It goes directly, into the building use.
We expend all that energy, so we don't even reverse meter or anything. We're just
No, I mean, if we generated more than we needed, it's set up to be able to, but we don't generate more.
So what we're talking about adding here is one of the public-private partnership deals, though. So would we'd have essentially 2 different systems, 2 different metering processes. Would it make more sense for the building where we're already controlling the solar panels to continue with the same model where we own the solar panels and do the public-private partnerships on other buildings, or?
Well, we just have 2 sets of buildings. We don't have a whole lot of roofs that we own, so it's basically this building and the Public Works building. So what we're looking at is using other sections of the building roofs, and actually we've also made available, we'll see what the proposals are, the mansard roof, the angled roof, the angled walkway. Those are other areas that might be ideal for solar panel applications.
Okay, and we wouldn't do this ourselves because of the upfront money?
Oh, yeah, hugely expensive.
Okay, well, thanks for the information.
Councilmember Wright.
On that, the RFP we put out related to solar, did we ask for pricing that included the RECs, the renewable energy credits, as well as, keeping them in and keeping them out? Because part of the value of the solar panel is the credit. Yes, you can sell it and get money for it, but that does mean that you're allowing someone else, in essence, just like we buy wind credits, to use the environmental carbon neutral aspect of the, so I'm just curious about that.
Where we've asked for pricing, we've asked them to break it out as to what part is what. So we should be able to take a look at the proposals we get back in and see what the difference is between including the RECs and not including the RECs.
Great. I'm very supportive of the idea of having a sweeper schedule or some more of a sense for people. I admit that I've only lived in basically more urban areas than Tacoma Park, but I've always lived in a place where there's actually a schedule where there are signs posted you couldn't park on this side of the street or in this block or that, and I found that very helpful to be able to not have your car there at that time as opposed to kind of guessing or listening and then running out and trying to move your car. So I'm a big fan of that. Just curious about how, I know we're not in the heavy fall raking season, but we are, I know often there's some raking or there's some leaf removal that needs to happen in the spring, and how it's going in terms of not using the leaf blowers.
I haven't heard or noticed any big impact now. I think the next thing we'll see is with the grass program, because they had previously used the blowers just to clear off the sidewalk and streets once they finish the mowing. So that'll probably be where we first kind of feel the restriction of that. We have, as I mentioned, taken a look at some other equipment. There is through a couple of different vendors, so we're keeping an eye on some equipment that we may be able to purchase that would work to some degree in those uses.
And then I noticed in the city gardener, for example, we spend $45,000 in contractual labor. Is that sort of just temp people to help the gardener out at times?
Yeah. Basically, for the different seasons, he's got a different work plan in the spring versus the summer versus the fall. And then there's also leaf collection temps that we bring in, usually in December or January, to do the leaf clearing in the parks, in the garden parts of the park.
So that the leaf clearing is in the contractual labor for gardens in the garden?
In the garden areas, yeah.
I was just asking because I was wondering, similar to what Councilmember Clay was asking about the opportunity to employ youth in certain situations, and I think some of those things you mentioned are hurdles, but maybe some of them could be mitigated by, for example, I worked for the City of Boston Public Works Department, and it was our responsibility to get to whatever the location was where we were going to be working for the day. Now, realizing you might move around, but often teen employment might not be 8 hours a day, right? It might be for a certain amount of time, and if it's teens that are in close proximity to some of the gardens, maybe there's a way to, particularly if it's part-time work it in so that they would be able to walk to or get to the location where the gardener's working, and it could really be kind of an apprenticeship kind of model program, and it seems like the liability issues would be much reduced because there wouldn't be the type of work that would be being done you'd be less likely to be using a tool or dealing with heavy equipment where you could really harm yourself.
Sure.
So just
I can understand that. I think part of it is, based on our size, some of we don't have big, huge city blocks of areas that need to be raked. So, we do move around quite a bit during the day. People don't stay in one park even for a couple hours. The other thing, we'll certainly look at it depending on what you guys want to do. We'll certainly work around and try to make it work. But my staff aren't trained for supervising youth. They basically are trained for working side by side with somebody who knows the business. So it would be a significant impact, and we would just have to figure out how to make that work. I would hate to see it impact our ability to get things done.
Yeah, I hear that. No, I totally hear that. And then my other question was, if you're not in Montgomery County, you do pay, I think it's $375 for your house to have your trash picked up as we roll it into our property tax rate.
I just went to look it up, actually, having heard your question earlier. If you're inside the leaf vacuuming district, which would be like my neighborhood nearby, that's $372.76. If you take out the leaf vacuuming portion of it, it's $283.85 for the refuse collection and all of the base system charges that go into that. Part of which Tacoma Park residents pay, but that's a very small amount.
So it's not a rebate, but it's another place where it's a service we provide and the county doesn't, and
It's a fee.
residents pay in a different way for that. Great, thanks a lot. That's all the questions I have. You do great work. I appreciate it.
We now head into the lineup of S's. Snipper, Schultz, and Siemens. Councilmember Snipper.
Not yet.
Wrong yes.
Wrong answer.
She put Stormwater.
I have a question about my favorite topic. On the state highways, like Flower Avenue is still a state highway, you do the leaf pickup on a schedule. And we had since we're now down to once, we had a problem last time because we had snow on that particular day, so it turned out to be hard. Do you have any thoughts on what you might do differently next time to avoid that problem?
Sure. Well, luckily with that snow, and most snows, we know it's coming. So what we did in that snow is we went out ahead of time. So we were able to get whatever people had already raked out beforehand. And then we went back around afterwards. It wasn't much snow, so it wasn't one of those, snowed and then froze and then stayed, 10 degrees for the next 3 weeks. It was gone, it was one of those snows that was gone the next day. So we went back out and collected everything that was at the curb.
So are we still planning to do, in 2012, we're still planning to do the one day?
The budget for this proposed is still the 5-week leaf collection, down from 7 weeks that we'd had 2 years ago, which would have the one collection for the 5 posted state highway routes.
Do you have any idea what the cost would be for another day?
We could figure it out. I mean, a lot of the cost with leaf collection is the temporary labor. We bring on 12 temps to supplement our 6 employees. So, we could take a look at, what the cost would be to add a day. And it wouldn't be one day, but it would probably be 4 days, basically just about a week for the, add a week to the program. You'd basically be looking at a 6-week program versus a 5-week. And I think originally we had costed out the weeks. I don't have a recollection of what that amount is per week.
Whatever you find out is fine.
So if we can just get that number for reconciliation.
Right.
Cost to add a week of collection.
Is that it?
That's it.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'd like to support the idea of trying to, with regard to street sweeping, this alternative side of the street sweeping. I know that there's this pattern set now that you just do all the streets in a particular area of the city. But the problem is that a lot, as I said before, for example, I have 3 vehicles. When I see the street sweeper coming, I got to figure out which side of the street sweeper's on, which direction it's coming, move my cars to where the pass has already been made, and hope that I've got the timing down correctly. And that's because I'm home, and I can do that, but a lot of people can't. And I think, like in many cities like New York, there is a signs posted as to when this sidewalk or a certain side of the street gets swept. People learn that and they park accordingly, which could also help you with on snow days as well, in the same manner, so that you would have one side of the street that's clear for plowing. I'd like you to at least think about that.
I can blow the dust off the study that was presented to the council, I don't know, 7 or so years ago, about posting for street sweeping routes. It was decided against, but we can take a look at that. We went through a whole development of a posting program.
Okay, well...
Sign pollution was the biggest concern there.
Sign pollution? Well, maybe it can be done without without having to put metal signs up, because now we got more people who are connected electronically, and we can communicate more easily than we used to be able to do, certainly 7 years ago, so that people can literally learn the pattern. I mean, all you really need to know is your street. You don't need to know about any other street in the city. Just like we know what days the garbage gets picked up.
Why don't we ask you to come up with some ideas and come back to us?
That's what I'm saying. Come up with some ideas. I agree that I'm in favor of the idea of our investigating this trash payment for trash collection. I think it'd be more equitable in a way for the city to save some money or earn some revenues. And I'd like us, so I support that. I think that was an idea that was in the environmental study. In the blue sheet, there's a reference to an expense for park and street lighting, $244,500. What does that mean?
Electricity charge.
Okay. Does that change much from year to year? Is that pretty flat?
Increases slightly.
Is that one of the numbers that people talk about will change were we to be able to own our own streetlights?
It potentially is where you could see an impact. Coupled with that charge is both the electricity fee as well as an operation and maintenance fee that the utility charges to maintain and operate the streetlights.
And that number, the maintenance...
$244,000.
Oh, that includes maintenance as well as the actual power?
Yep. We are able to purchase power from an alternative to Pepco. So we currently use Washington Gas Energy Services for our electric supply for those uses. So we've got low-rate power, but we are locked into Pepco for the operations and maintenance. But altogether, the cost is $244,000.
My last question has to do with the idea, something I mentioned a few weeks ago, or raised a question about installing public city-owned trash cans at certain strategic locations. For example, in Ward 6, you have Jackson Street, which runs into Long Branch, dead ends into Long Branch Park. There's a footbridge that goes through the woods across the stream, comes out on Jackson Avenue on the other side. The park itself is the responsibility of park and planning, but the trash, people go through there, it just accumulates on both ends and in the middle. And I think if there was a public trash can there that the Department of Public Works could pick up on regular trash routes, it would be a place for people to deposit trash, because right now there just isn't anything like that. And in my ward, there's just an awful lot of sort of free-floating trash. I don't know where it comes from. People throw it out of their car windows, or kids drop it when they're waiting for the school bus or getting off the school bus. It just accumulates, and if you're out, like I am, often walking with the dog, as others, you would like to be able to pick it up and put it somewhere instead of putting it in your pocket.
We do have public trash cans, and we can add one to any location you like. Just let me know the location.
Give me an idea of how we can go about doing that, and maybe I can get my community association to work on it with you to sort of come up with a plan. Maybe we can get I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6?
Yeah, well, just identify the locations. They just need to be accessible from the street. We can't walk back in. I wouldn't want to put one where we'd walk back
No.
into somebody other property,
Understand.
but as long as it was curbside. We have probably 90-some public right-of-way trash containers throughout the city, so
Oh,
we
okay,
would
I
just
didn't
add
know
these to
that.
those programs.
Okay, wonderful, thank you, that's good.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for being here at this late hour. I'd also like to just reinforce what you said. I've also heard many compliments about Mike's work with the gardening and the whole gardening staff. I think that's becoming one of the defining features of the city, and that's just great to see. A recent report on glass recycling suggested that it really might not be a cost-effective environmental program, that glass is really not a, other than for the bulk in the landfills, it is not an environmental hazard, and that the environmental cost of collecting and recycling that glass outweighs the environmental savings. And I just wondered if you had
No,
seen
I'm
that.
not familiar with any of that. I'll have
given
to
any,
look.
I would encourage you to look at that and give feedback to the council on maybe we're not saving the environment in the way that we think we are.
One of the things I'll note is, and I've mentioned this before at previous council meetings, is that the weight of our trash, actually the weight of our recycling, has dropped significantly since the program established as a result of less glass. So, the manufacturers are going to an alternative to glass in many, many ways. So when the program started in the early 90s, there was a lot more glass containers than there are now. But that's basically as a result of reducing costs for transportation and hauling and
Sure.
manufacture. So everything's going to plastic as more options become available. So there's less glass. We pick up less glass than we used to, but I hadn't heard anything related to that, so I'll take a look.
I'll send you a copy of that report.
That'd be great.
Several years ago, Pepco was authorized by the state to trim trees around power lines, and they have done so very aggressively, not just in the city, but across the state. But one of the things they do is terminate the trunks on the trees, and they also make other radical reductions in the limbs of the trees. And we're starting to see now that some of those trees that were earlier trimmed by Pepco are now dying and having to be removed by the city. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that we ought to be taking a look at the expense, that the burden that we're paying as part of the tree trimming that Pepco is doing, and that if we might not be better to require Pepco to remove the trees now rather than trim them to the point where they're killing them, and then 3 to 5 years later we're having to bear the expense of removing them.
I think the city arborist would share your opinion. The process that they've been using now between the Pepco arborist and the city arborist is they meet on site with the foreman, and they agree beforehand about what's going to happen to each tree and make those decisions as which one should come down as a result of the pruning being too extreme as to create a health problem in the future versus maintenance pruning. So they actually go tree by tree. One of the challenges has been that usually the crews will come 4 to 6 at a time, so our arborists can't keep up with 4 or 6 crews. They can agree tree by tree for what which ones are going to be removed and which ones are going to be pruned and how, but then the oversight is proven to be challenging. But there is an intention between Pepco and the city to make a decision and agreement tree by tree when they come through.
I appreciate that, and I would ask Mayor Williams if we couldn't have a session to review our memorandum of understanding with Pepco, because I think this is crucial to the character of Tacoma Park. It's an important an important program that I know consumers worry about power outages, and Pepco blames many of the power outages on the older trees that are near the power lines. But I think the current approach is giving pretty free rein to Pepco, and they have shown that they exceed their permitted techniques in trimming these trees. And I'm just saying that I think that we ought to be proactive. If the community is in support of this type of trimming of the trees, I think it's putting a burden on the city to pay for the removal of the trees, and we ought to have Pepco paying for those. And then lastly, in regard to what Ms. Clay had talked about with the youth program, possibly working with Public Works and as supported by Councilmember Wright, I would suggest that the extra burden of supervision should not be borne strictly by the Public Works Department, but it should be a program that would be implemented in collaboration with the Recreation Department, and that the additional supervisory workload could be put on the Recreation Department. Thank you.
I've got 7 quick things. I think I can get through them pretty quickly. Some are just observations, some are questions. I'll start with a question. In the CIP budget, one item that's in here for the FY12 budget is the asphalt miller and paver coming out of the general fund at $106,000. I know we've bumped that, I don't know how many years, but I'll say a couple.
2.
Two. And I kind of eyed that as a possible thing to bump again, and I wondered if you could just give your observations on what part that plays, how important it is, and what the impact would be of bumping it again.
Sure. Basically, the use of that piece of equipment would enable us, or why we suggested it in the first place, is it would enable us to do minor street repair work, where we're not having to mill and pave an entire block of a road, but where there's a faulty section of pavement, a smaller section of pavement, where it's difficult to get our contractor who normally does our street work to mobilize and come out. They're not going to come out for a small piece of pavement. Even if we string together 5 or 10 little sections of pavement, it's very difficult to get the contractor to mobilize his subcontractor to come out and do the milling and paving. So what it means is that we have to then do repairs in a manual fashion, where we take our loader out and we excavate, saw, cut, dig out with shovels and equipment, and then bring in the pavement and use a manual roller and roll it out. This piece of equipment would enable us to do more minor pavement repair work more quickly. So we could identify small sections of street that need to be patched because of alligator cracks or bad utility patches or whatever it is, and we can go in, and the equipment actually has the ability within itself to mill in a mechanical fashion, remove the top however much you want, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches of asphalt, and then you put in hot mix asphalt and then are able to pave it with the equipment itself. So it's kind of an all-in-one, even has a tack coat machine. So everything you need to affect a patch is available through that piece of equipment. I think we see it as a way to improve road quality on a short-term basis. Obviously, we wouldn't want to use this for our street resurfacing program in total. That we think is best done and much more efficiently and cost-effectively done by a contractor, where they can come in and their intention is to do a large quantity of street work. This is for the small, mid-block pavement repair work that needs to be done, sections of potholes, bad drainage patterns, whatever. It just enables us to use this piece of equipment to do that work. We could do it ourselves in-house. It just takes a much longer amount of time and many more people. Or we can string together several and have our contractor come in and do that work. It's just difficult to get them in for small work, and then they charge a mobilization fee every time they come in, so the cost tends to be less effective than when you've got a large project.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to say that in general, I found it very helpful with the CIP section in the budget to have the breakdown at the end of it, the last page, where it's got the CIP totals for the various sections, the equipment replacement reserve and the general fund and the speed camera fund and special revenue funds and the stormwater fund, to see all of that laid out that way and to see the scale, excuse me, the scale of what's being considered. And I just note that it identifies about $3.3 million for the FY12 budget, and the largest single item is $1.2 million for the speed camera fund. And it's helpful to see that laid out over the 5 years. My sense is that we've had a CIP chart like this in the past, but it may not have been as complex as this with all of the different funds laid out. It could be that we have in the past, but I don't remember that, and I find this very helpful.
Yeah, it usually has a total.
Yeah, I know it's had it, but I think the end piece laid out that way, to my mind anyway, looks different and is helpful. Also wanted to say that in looking through the budget packet for tonight, I was particularly struck by the areas, by the part of the memo that has the strategic plan initiatives in your department, and particularly the sustainability initiatives in yours. It was just really helpful to have it laid out in this way that ties back to the strategic plan, and that I thought most of what you had there was very interesting and helpful, and I was glad to see it there and to see it itemized. So I encourage that memo that we've been getting for the departments, that's a very helpful addition to the budget discussion.
Actually, we used the same approach last year.
Well, I don't remember it, but
I'm glad you like it.
This just seems... I don't think it was as detailed last year.
No, this is better than last year.
Whatever it is, it feels different.
Well, good. Better is good.
I always read
We
it.
thought it was a great idea, so we did it again. The city staff is saying.
Just giving positive strokes on that section. Then on another place on the packet tonight, on the next to last page, number 7, you talk about current city code requires certain utility companies to request permits when working the right-of-way. In the past, the companies have ignored city requirements and have not provided prompt or quality restoration. The city engineer will oversee efforts to improve the situation. Can you just say a little bit more about that?
Well, I was trying to figure out how to slide in a few new bombshells on the utility front.
So this is something new. It's not last year.
Well, it is something that we've done for years and years and years. I think we're getting more and more aggressive as the utility companies are creating more and more headaches for us. One of the changes that we made last year was in regard to WSSC, we used to allow them to do a mid-street, halfway street mill and pave. No more. It's curb to curb for us. We don't care how big their trench is. They got to do curb to curb. Same will be the case with Washington Gas on 410. There's just no discussion about it. It's an absolute. We just state it matter-of-factly that they need to mill and pave curb to curb. And if you just keep saying it and nodding it, they eventually get it. Now, of course, the proof is in the end result. But we have required that of WSSC in their most recent projects, and we'll continue to, as well as Washington Gas. The situation on Ethan Allen is a very frustrating one. It was a project that we knew was coming up. We spent 2 different meetings with the whole panoply of people on Washington Gas and city staff on the other side of the table discussing the project. They submitted a permit. We provided them a They submitted an application, we provided them a permit, and then they went around and did 180 degrees different than what they told us they were going to do. And in discussions with them about, well, you told us you were going to do this boring under the street, no trench cut, and here you got a, saw cut machine, and you've just cut the pavement of the asphalt. So it's been a very, very frustrating project, and it's hard to understand. And again, I should keep my opinions to myself. It's hard to understand why the change in process without the notification in the meantime. So we've been basically trying to play catch up on the Ethan Allen situation. Albeit, there's a serious problem out there. There is an ancient gas line that is leaking, and we have numerous residents on that street smell gas routinely. It's a public health problem. It's a serious safety problem. We don't want to stand in the way of the obvious need for improvement. At the same time, working with that particular project has been a challenge. The city engineer has been out there at least weekly talking to both the subcontractor as well as the project manager. They met on site today at 11 o'clock and reinforced the city's requirements in terms of an improvement to patching. There's supposed to be an improvement to the patching. They're going to mill and do some work and re-smooth the pavement surface. Why they can't, I didn't think anybody could do a patch worse than WSSC, but apparently Washington Gas subcontractor has got the new standard, and maybe we need to, create an award for them that we offer. So we continue to share the residents' frustration with that, and we are on an almost daily basis in communication with Washington Gas requesting improvements. There's supposed to be some improvement to the patching starting tomorrow. We're asking them for a schedule on the milling and paving. One of the things we want to avoid is that the project is completed and then they don't subcontract out the milling and paving for another 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, which is what's happened with the WSSC projects, where the contractor's in and out, and then WSSC forgets to arrange for the milling and paving. So we're trying to push them to schedule it within the week of the completion of the project. They tell us they're about 4 weeks out from completing the work. I don't know that it's been a difficult project for them in that they aren't telling us that they've encountered conditions that were different than they anticipated, so we really don't understand what the problem has been in terms of that aspect of the work. It's a challenging street to work on in that it's narrow and you have traffic control, and it's difficult, but that exists in other places as well.
The good news is that they didn't mill it and repave it before they started.
Right.
I mean, WSSC hadn't milled it and repaved it.
Right,
It's like
right.
There's
Or
a silver
state
lining
highway,
that's a
yeah.
stretch.
Yeah, so we are requiring them to mill and pave curb to curb for the section that they're working on. We're also, in addition, requiring that they put back in what they took out. So there was, in some places, 10 to 12 inches of concrete subbase, which is why the road is not in worse shape, given how long it was left alone. And we're requiring that they put concrete back in as a subbase, which is really, nobody does that anymore. Basically, nobody does concrete subbase on roads anymore, and nobody requires contractors to put concrete back. But we're, again, trying to hold a very tough line with the utility on that, basically saying whatever you took out is what you've got to come put back in.
Can I interject one quick question on that? Is there any fear that because they're putting in so many big holes in the middle of the street that even the concrete will not settle correctly?
Sure. Yeah, and you only have to look at Ritchie Avenue to see that process in place. One of the things that we changed as a result of the Ritchie Avenue project, however many years ago that was, is we require them to do compaction testing and provide us the results of their compaction testing. So they have to bring a third party out and verify that they've compacted it to whatever the city engineer requires in terms of the
And that will help keep
it basically means they have to put it down in lifts,
the
and they have
concrete.
to have it tested to reach whatever rate of compaction is required. We haven't gotten those compaction tests yet because they haven't. Right now, all that's in there is trash fill.
Right.
Uncompacted fill. They'll have to excavate it all out and re-put it in.
So it sounds like we've gotten a lot better at forcing them to do the right thing through bad experiences. And we continue to improve as they continue to head the other direction.
Well, construction is a tough thing. I mean, I wouldn't want to have their job. They have hard conditions to work in, but basically, we're trying to make sure that the end product is in good shape for the city.
Right. And it sounds like we've done the right thing of letting them know the expectations up front and not making them feel like we changed the rules after they start.
No, it's all spelled out in permit conditions that we attach to the permit. Oftentimes, the subcontractor has never seen the permit, and we're the first ones that show them the copy of the permit that they signed on for. That's the subject of another discussion next time we have our big utility powwow, which happens every 3 or 4 years. We've got to get, one of the problems is that the utilities subcontract this stuff out without specifics as to where they're going and what they're doing, and obviously they're doing it in a big scale. So
it's more like a generic, you're going to do this number of feet of X, give us the unit price, here's another project.
Yes, so they don't necessarily know that when it comes to Tacoma Park, though their subcontractor students learn, there are tree protection requirements that don't exist in some places. There's going to be sub-base compaction testing that doesn't go in some places. There's going to be curb-to-curb milling and paving that doesn't exist in some places. So it's a little bit of a sea change, and we need to figure out how to work with the utilities to make sure that in their contract documents they're including some of these requirements so they can at least have an item price, because oftentimes what happens is subcontractor hasn't given them a price for something that we're requiring the utility to do.
Right.
So then they're in a situation with a change order that nobody likes to be in.
Right. Okay.
So we need to work together. That's kind of the next phase. I just wanted to let you know, and I know we're getting very late, but all the utilities have big projects coming up in the city that are going to make people very unhappy. Washington Gas has submitted a permit application for work in the Tulip Maple section, just where Pepco has finished. It's still unclear to us what they're trying to do, but it sounds a lot like they're doing similar to work to what they did on Ethan Allen. They've got a old low-pressure system that they want to convert to a high-pressure system, and then they have to reconnect all the house lines. In this particular project, they're planning to run a high-power line through an old cast-iron 4-inch gas line that was abandoned in the street. I can't imagine that's going to work very well. But at any rate, we've got a big application in front of us with Washington Gas. We've already informed Washington Gas we're not doing anything to approve this permit until they clean up their act on Ethan Allen Avenue, so we're kind of sitting them on hold there. We've also had WSSC notify us of 2 projects. One is a project on the 7500 block at Carroll Avenue, and we're very happy that finally WSSC is replacing that horribly defective ancient water main that there's more patches in the street than there is untouched pavement because it just fails all the time. And it's created a tremendous burden for the residents that live along that block.
Is that what's causing the water, though, down around the bridge?
Well, no, that's from another side of that's from beyond Flower Avenue on the other end.
No, there's water on there's the Carroll line on our side, isn't it? On our side between Lincoln and...
Between Lincoln and Jefferson.
Right, and so there's water on that side, not on the Flower side, but on that side of the bridge that's going around and eroding around the bridge there.
There's a number of problems on the bridge, but we can go into that. Some of it's drain-related, water-related. I don't think much of it is water main-related. I think it's storm water or spring water that's being pumped out and discharged onto the street. But there's a problem with the storm drain on the bridge itself that exacerbates a drainage problem once the water gets there. Anyway. So WSSC has got a project. I got a call. Well, there's the 7500 Carroll, and we're still waiting for details on that. I know there's a lot of community interest about the detour plans, and we're trying to stay on top of that. Unfortunately, apparently WSSC has circulated a letter that the residents got on the 7500 block at Carroll Avenue today that basically put the timeline for the work from tomorrow to June 23rd, 2012. What are you supposed to do with a letter like that? And I'm sure, my guess is what happened is WSSC has a number of projects that they think is going to take them through June 23rd, 2012. So any place they're going to do work within that contract, they've delivered this, standard letter that means nothing to the people that get it. A year and a half for a water line work. So we're unfortunately kind of back to square one with WSSC, though we're hoping to get some specifics, and we've absolutely communicated with the project manager that there has to be certain notification. We've required a message board, weeks in advance, specific letters to the residents. If WSSC doesn't do it, we will do it. And also we have to approve their detour plan. And State Highway, it's of course State Highway that gives them the permit, but State Highway in the past has been very supportive of making sure the city signed off on the detour plan. So I don't anticipate a problem with that, but it sure was disconcerting to see that people had gotten a letter today saying work was going to start tomorrow, between tomorrow and a year and a half from now.
And Daryl, on that detour plan, is there any alternative to going around Jefferson?
We're going to take a look at it. If we reach a consensus that that's the best way, what we're going to try to do is limit the people that would be detoured there. It could only be one lane of traffic from one direction being detoured there, and that would have to be preceded by communication with Ride-On and the school bus system so that they could reroute around there and not have buses on Jefferson Avenue. We would suggest some no parking both on both ends of Jefferson Avenue so that the turning issue could be a little less problematic. And then we would also
do not enter on Fremont, right? Something.
Yeah, we would also, we could certainly do some signage that do not enter, or this is not a through street, or whatever might help people understand. And then also from the Lincoln-Jefferson intersection, not allow traffic to turn in there because that creates even more of a problem. So in the event that, the other alternative is you have people turn on Flower Avenue ahead of Jefferson, then they go Flower to Maplewood to Maple to Lincoln to Carroll. It's doable, but it's it'll be one of those things where we'll try to be cooperative and work with them, but basically try to make sure that the impact. And we also haven't heard from WSSC. Are they closing one lane, both lanes for the whole project? Day work, night work? We don't know. So we're waiting to hear on that. And then lastly, Pepco has also submitted an application for more pole, high-power line transfer and pole replacement. I think in the adjacent area like Cedar, Willow, so we've just gotten the application for that. So we've got a lot of utility work coming up.
Can we deny that application until they actually give us a plan for completing the one they started?
Yeah, we talked about that at the staff meeting today.
So it sounds from all this like it's possible that we might need to have some higher level communications with the utilities, and if staff feels that's appropriate, I think the council could get involved in communicating that. So I'll make the offer on behalf of my colleagues, and I'll make the offer that I will be ready, willing, and able to go to the utility to meet with whoever is appropriate to make the point that things have to change. And let me cover the other things in my list so we can finish up and get out of here, and there's 3 more lights. So,
Is this on the stormwater?
No, not there.
Not
I
yet.
haven't done the stormwater yet, no. I'll just quickly say that a number of my colleagues have voiced support for pay-to-throw. I continue to not be looking favorably on that. I'm not convinced it'll work, but we'll see where that goes.
Joe says we have to stop calling it pay-to-throw and call it rewards for recycling.
Rewards for recycling, whatever it is, I don't think it's going to pay what we think it's going to pay, and I think it's just going to cost shift onto larger families. Anyway, I'll also say, remind my colleagues that one of the continuing topics of discussion at the MML Montgomery chapter is our continuing effort to fight Pepco at the state, whatever commission.
Public Service Commission.
Public Service Commission. On the rate case, I've also talked with some of the other folks. We had a little bit of a discussion about it last month. We'll be discussing it again Thursday night. I've talked with the city manager about the possibility of us having some money in the budget to contribute toward that effort, and there's possibilities for it expanding beyond just the basic rate case, but there's other pieces of it involved to deal with a lot of the Pepco issues and understanding what's involved in the street light maintenance that they do now, what they charge, what we would get for it, some of the additional pitfalls of going into possibly owning street lights, how to make that happen. So that's an ongoing issue, and that's one that the chapter is dealing with. And then I'll just say finally, it's a question, but it's an observation on the city's purchase of hybrids. It's been interesting to me as I went from being a relative doubter about the benefits of hybrids to actually owning one and understanding some of the ways in which they reduce long-term maintenance. I know in the case of ours that the oil changes are 10,000 miles, the first tune-up is at 100,000, and a lot of people claim that they get like 130,000 miles on the brakes. And is that your experience, that the maintenance costs on hybrids are reduced in a number of areas that people might not be aware of?
I haven't looked into that, but I can pull that information and let you know.
If and when you have time. It's not a high priority, but it would be helpful to know if those maintenance areas reduce costs in addition to just reduced gasoline. And Council Member Snipper, then Wright, then Schultz.
Okay, quick observation. Your comment about we're now using single-stream recycling, that isn't on our website.
It is, but...
Not really. It's still written to say, recycling containers for bottles and cans are available in Public Works, place glass, plastic containers, tin, aluminum cans together, and recycle. It's still the same language for
we still
not
ask
mixing
people
all
to put
together.
their paper in paper bags and their bottles and cans in their recycling containers.
But this doesn't really, kind of switch to the new thinking. And it's caused a number of residents to claim that we're not doing it.
That's been the case since I started the program in 1999.
No, I understand, but, it would be nice to at least have somebody go over it and update
Sure.
it.
Councilmember Wright.
Is there any chance that we could have some sort of coordination between Washington Gas and WSSC in the sense of, like, if they're coming to do the big tear-up on Maple and Tulip or whatever, is it also possible that there might need, the water mains are all very old around here. Does WSSC have any plan to replace water mains in the next 5 years? And if so, it seems logical that they should do it at the same time. So I don't know if that's maybe part of the higher level conversation that the mayor might help construct. And then I had a question, just to sort of get your opinion. What would you suggest, or what would you advocate for in terms of giving residents kind of the best service? Do you think we should cut the Miller paver or reduce the amount of money we're spending on the sidewalk construction and
Which kid do I want to throw under the bus?
improvement? No, if you had to choose, if you had to choose one or the other, I think the Miller paver is what, 150, 185?
106 is there.
106, so, we still are spending a lot on the sidewalks. Even if we did the proposal I had in the Green Deal, I think it's still like $690,000. So would you take the 106 for the Miller paver? Would you, what's your?
It's kind of a difficult choice, of course, and you know that I'm going to say that, but it's dealing with sort of apples and oranges in that I see sidewalks as pedestrian safety and walkability, and I see asphalt Miller paver as repairing the roads, which is more of the same, more cars, more, basically what you're doing is making sure people have a smoother ride when they're driving their car, and a little bit bicycles having a better ride, but basically it's car versus walker. So if I looked at it in that bigger kind of brush, I have more concerns about the walkability and pedestrian safety in the city than I do about the driving safety in the city. So, on that kind of apples to oranges kind of comparison, I would, be more concerned about sidewalk issues than I am about pavement issues. Though I don't know if you guys hear as many complaints about pavement as we did maybe, 6 or 7 years ago. I don't hear as many pavement complaints as we did in the past, but...
The main pavement complaints I hear about state highways.
Yeah.
Councilmember Schultz.
Just one question regarding back to Ethan Allen. What maybe you can answer. Given the state's abiding interest in it being a state highway and having the opportunity to control the care and maintenance of that street forever, why are they not an ally in trying to beat WSSC into submission, or whoever it is that's giving us a hard time, and getting their, don't they have a stake in this, or dog in this fight?
One would think so. My experience has been it's been very difficult to get State Highway to weigh in and roar at all at the utilities. I mean, basically, our WSSC experience on Carroll Avenue, had it not been for the city raising Cain with WSSC, State Highway wouldn't have known or cared when they milled and paved that street, or that they put the lines back on, or that they painted the crosswalks. Just not a care. And when the pavement failed after they'd milled and paved it, again, it was us that said, you got a failed patch in a week-old pavement. State Highway does not have, I think, the level of staffing that allows it to advocate on a very focused degree like that.
I hear what you're saying. That makes me a little concerned when we get a letter like we did from the state today saying how they're going to take care of that, of 410, would like to be able to do that if we're in agreement. You know, that sort of seems like a level of care that isn't going to be have a very high standard. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, no more lights. We're done with Public Works. Now we do Stormwater.
All right.
And we're at 13:11.
Realize you've got me at 10:45, and this is one of our programs that we like to crow about, so I will try to keep it very brief and stick with the basic facts, which I'm sure many already know. We'll have completed 5 bioretention basins by the end of this year, 2 in the rear of the community center, 1 on Westmoreland Avenue in collaboration with the Arts for the People and the Old Town Tacoma Business Association, and 1 on Kirkland and Kennewick, which was part of a traffic calming program. We've got others planned for FY12, and I can get into those. We did this year establish the 5-year CIP for a stormwater project, and we've got a list of those projects available. The budget that you see in front of you basically advocates a continuation of the low-impact design for stormwater management, the cleaning of the system and TV inspection that we talked about earlier. And as the state and federal government gets more specific about the requirements related to NPDES and pollution limits for as related to the new Bay program, we'll be looking at ways to track our work, measure our work, and promote our programs as it relates to stormwater management. One of the things you'll see in the document that I included that lists our projects, or our program as it relates to the sustainability goals. I think you should have had that in your handout tonight. Is basically, there's a few programs that we're going to be exploring as a way to help us meet these upcoming discharge limits that the city will have, and they're basically going to be related to trash, sediment, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So we already know what they're coming down with, but basically the ways that we will be considering meeting those requirements. Some we already do, increasing the amount of bioretention basins we have, which do a great deal towards limiting sediment and also your phosphorus and nitrogen loads. We're going to be looking at retrofitting stormwater inlets, particularly those where we have a lot of trash problems. As no surprise, we found that the inlets along the school zones are loaded with plastic bottles and cans because kids drink their soda and toss it, and it ends up in our storm drains. So those will probably be the areas where we'll first start installing them. And those are basically inserts within an existing inlet system that allow you to basically have a cage that you can pick out, and it collects the trash in it, and then you clean it on a more regular basis and pull that trash out. We've got a couple of inlet retrofits that we've already done, one at the Public Works Yard, which is more kind of a full service. It's removing hydrocarbons, gasoline, chemicals, as well as the trash and sediments. And we also have one at the end of Linden Avenue, where we've got a sediment capture device as well as a trash capture device, and there's a biological filtering of the water that takes place as a result of it passing through a garden bed area. So we'll be looking at expanding the number of those. The other programs that I listed on that sheet, and I can't claim these aren't my original ideas, but in looking at programs that other jurisdictions, particularly Montgomery County, have recently developed as a result of their watershed implementation plans, is taking a look at a lawn stewardship program that provides education to residents about the harmful effects of pesticides and fertilizers, and may even advocate restriction on the use of those lawn care chemicals in the city. That is maybe an action this council may want to consider. Pet waste collection stations in problem areas. We have used that in one of our playground parks where we had a huge problem with pet waste. We don't find that a big problem in many of our parks, but we may want to be checking in with residents to find out if there's places where these problems do occur. An anti-littering education campaign that would include identifying trash hotspots, kind of what you were talking about, Fred.
Right.
And the development of programs to address littering, and then looking at incentive campaigns for the removal of impervious surfaces, whether it's for private owners or for our own city streets, where we can take out, narrow intersections and things and add a bioretention area. So those are the kind of things that will be ways that we anticipate meeting our upcoming requirements as the laws continue to change and get clarified. I think that was all I had. Basically, staff-wise and funding-wise, things are remaining the same in the stormwater program. I did want to mention the projects that we've got planned for this upcoming fiscal year. Poplar Mills, Sligo Mills to start the debris removal program. A bioretention area at the Prince George's Avenue and Circle Avenue area. A Wabash Avenue filtration and erosion control. That's a steep slope heading straight into Sligo Creek. And then again, if the city chooses to move forward with the Ritchie Avenue traffic calming, we have submitted a grant through the state for a bioretention circle at Ritchie and Oswego Avenue, so that would supplement basically fund the construction of that bioretention area as part of the traffic calming plan. We should be hearing soon as to whether or not we've received those funds. If we don't get the grant, then basically we'd have to take a look at what we wanted to do there. It was originally designed specifically for traffic control. We asked those same engineers to add a bioretention component to it. So we would have to decide whether to include that or pull that out again if grant funds weren't available. But the budget is built around the assumption of grant funds, $111,000 for that project. And I think there are also some minor repairs that we've got planned, a series of places where we know of standing water, Westmoreland and 2nd, Auburn Avenue, Hayward and Jackson, and the inlet repair, and the stabilization at a Circle Woods outfall. Also improvements on Walnut Avenue, 4th and Allegheny, and then unknown as yet inlet repairs that we'll need to do. So those are some of the work that we've got planned for next year.
And I just wanted to ask a general question. Thinking about the requirements that are going to be coming with the watershed improvement plans, I would say I was half expecting that the city manager's proposed budget would have some increase in the stormwater fee, anticipating an increase in the number and type of projects. The fee is proposed to remain the same. If the fee went up this year, next year, to cover an increase in the kinds of projects that were being done to address what we need to do for the watershed improvement plans, can you just say a little bit of a little something about how the existing what is it, three-quarter time for the half-time for the city engineer, overseeing those kinds of things, the ability of the people and the infrastructure that we have now to address an expanded scope of work what that might mean. Is there excess capacity? Would it mean, getting some kind of a contract engineer, or I'm just looking for some general sense of where we are on that, if we could expand what it would mean.
Sure. City manager and I have had some of those very same conversations. We're pretty maxed out, to say the least.
That's what I anticipated.
Staff level with the project loads that we take on, and it's very much as a result of the collaborative work where the arborist pitches in and others pitch in to try to help manage the contracts that we have in place for the construction. So in order to expand the program, we would need to bring on either a part-time or contractual person to oversee and do the design development as well as the contract oversight, construction oversight of some of these projects.
And was some discussion had about, well, gee, maybe if we're going to do that, we need time to work through some of this and gear up and anticipate, and we're not ready to do that right now, so we won't raise it this year, but we'll be ready to raise it next year, and we'll have a plan in place to do that?
Well, we're waiting for the details to hit the, pencil to hit the paper. We're waiting for the federal and state government to basically spell out for our area what our requirements are going to be, and then we see how far away we are from where we are now to where we need to get, and then create the program that gets us there. It's kind of like a chicken and egg. Everybody's been thinking about how to meet them. We have a pretty good idea of what we think will be effective. We're just waiting to hear what they are, and then figure out how far away we are from those goals.
Yeah, just because what Maryland is anticipating is that we'll be 90% of the way toward our 2025 goals by 2017. And yes, I've spent a couple of years' worth of meetings waiting for details to get down to this level, and we're almost there.
Yeah, they're getting clearer and clearer, but we're still not quite there yet.
And there's been a slight hiccup, and things are delayed just a little bit more, but it should be coming this calendar year. Councilmember Wright.
I know this isn't stormwater, that's the city's responsibility, but the issue on Philadelphia Avenue, just past Chicago, as you're coming into the city, after the bus stop continues, State Highway, there's a
inlet.
It's just like the grading is slightly off there, so a huge puddle actually gets created, which when you drive by, if you're not careful, splashes everyone who's waiting in the bus waiting station, basically, right there. And so, I don't know if it's what we need to do. I know we've tried to talk to State Highway about this before, but I just wanted to reiterate that as a need, and I really don't think it's probably a few degrees just in that area, because the drain is not very far away. It's just the grading is off. I just wanted to check this Grant Avenue bioretention that you have in FY13 capital project. Is that at the end? Is that at the end?
Right.
We're envisioning
back behind the building here.
somehow that along with some sort of visual screen. Great. That's super. Thanks so much. And then I don't know if there's other places that the pet waste station idea would work to get credit towards our plan beyond parks. At least in much of the neighborhoods in Ward 1, it's pretty heavy dog walking area, and people should pick up after their pets, but don't always do a great job of that. And it still is. It's often in the public right-of-way strip where people don't pick up. So I wonder if those similar types of stations might work, throughout the neighborhoods, if that's an approach we're using to meet stormwater requirements.
We haven't taken a look at doing them in the right-of-way, just given the imagined difficulty of selecting whose house that gets to sit in front of. Whereas with the parks and playgrounds, we have trash cans there, we're maintaining it, it's city-owned property. So that's been a little bit of the challenge about. And the not really seeing that there's a volume that would warrant such a thing, or it might actually encourage people not to be responsible because they have a place there that they could, somebody else could take care of the problem. So it's a little bit of a catch-22.
I guess I was thinking more by waste stations, I was thinking the things that just disperse the bags and actually have the containers that properly contain the smell. By way station, maybe you were thinking about something else?
No, that's what I'm thinking of. I don't think they really fully contain the smell in certain conditions, summer days and rainy days, and it'll be a challenge to locate that in the right-of-way.
Okay.
But I'm happy to hear of locations if neighborhoods or
if
people
you
have a
want-
suggestion.
Yeah, if we were interested in actually trying that in some parts of the neighborhood, I could have conversations with residents to see if anybody was more amenable to having that near them or not.
Councilmember Clay?
So, I think we've talked a little bit about how much the stormwater fee is able to support the actual activities that we need to do, and we're pretty tight on that. And in the document that I put out in, I think it was January, and then reproduced again a couple of weeks ago, I said, that I would support increasing the stormwater fee to cover those costs, and I would continue to do that. But I was really surprised when the mayor said that he wasn't interested in the rewards for recycling program because it would have an adverse impact on larger families. And I think it's interesting because what I would say is that with the rewards for recycling program, you at least have some control over the fee because you can in fact reduce your, it is possible to reduce your waste stream and to increase your recycling. Whereas the city doesn't currently have any mechanism for people to reduce the stormwater fee that they pay based on the investments that they make on their own property in reducing the impact of stormwater by having their own rain gardens, by planting more trees that soak up water. And that's one of the things I had talked about, is whether or not we could do some sort of a tree canopy, sort of relationship between tree canopy or other things and the fees for the stormwater, which would give people control of that. So I just want to put that out there.
I was reacting to, you get the first can free.
Right, which means that you could avoid the fee.
Councilmember Schultz.
The fund balance in the stormwater management fund summary proposes to shrink it to the end of FY12 to $181,000, which would make it the smallest it's been in 5 years, 4 years or so. And I'm just sort of wondering if that concerns you, or should be of concern to us, in that it's smaller. The fund is that speaking to us about having to raise the stormwater fee? Do you know what I'm saying?
If Daryl has some comments. I think it's a little bit the same issue or the same quandary you get into with property taxes and what's an appropriate reserve, because I do think there's a balancing act in terms of not having such a huge fund balance in the stormwater fund, since that's a specific question you're asking. Essentially, you're assessing a fee if there's not a purpose for spending it. Part of the reason it has gone down, I think Daryl helped me out, I think it was current fiscal year, FY11, is we did purchase a street sweeper, which was a fairly large expenditure.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is just the ability of Daryl and Ali to basically get projects done. Daryl and I had just talked last week about some changes we needed to make, which is the reconciliation sheet that you have in your packet tonight. I would be concerned if it got too low, because there's always a chance of having something catastrophic happen or break. But at least in my conversation with Daryl last week, I think the $181,000 is a figure that she thinks is an adequate cushion should something unexpected happen.
Okay.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. Where's my question? Oh, yeah. the stormwater parts of the Flower Avenue project. Where do they show up? In the CIP, they don't show up under stormwater, but there are Flower Avenue projects.
Right, they're shown in the CIP as a special revenue or general fund project. We're in the design phase proposed for next year, so once we get deeper into that, I think we'll have a better sense of what portion of the project is stormwater related, what is sidewalk, what is lights, what is bus stops. And then we may want to push some of those costs. Yeah, 2013. And right now, it's shown as a large lump of money in the capital budget for that. But it has the ability to get partially paid for out of the stormwater.
Any other questions? Then I think we have finished the stormwater, and therefore we are finished for the evening. We are adjourned.
Love it.
Thank you all for staying.
Love it, love it.